Good evening. Welcome, councillors, to the meeting of the Planning Committee of the 15th of April 2025. Welcome to the members of the public who have joined us in person, and welcome to those who are following the meeting on the online webcast. As always, please can those speaking ensure their microphones are switched on for the benefit of those listening online. Members of the public, if you're only here to observe or speak to a particular agenda item, please feel free to leave the meeting once the item has concluded. Please remind everybody here tonight this is a public meeting, not a meeting for the public, so if there are any disturbances to the meeting, you will be asked to leave the chamber. We are not expecting a test of the building's fire alarm, so if the fire alarm does sound, could attendees please exit the building via the nearest exit. The rallying point is to the rear of the car park. Do we have any apologies, David?
No apologies, Chair, so we are voting to 12.
Thank you. The minutes from the meeting the 18th of March have been circulated. I am unaware of any amends. Has anybody got any comments? If no, please go over a proposer, Councillor Payne, and a seconder, Councillor Smith. All those in favour?
Those that are here, that's carried. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Payne.
Sorry, just checking which Payne it was. 2024-0403 FUL. I do personally know the applicant and my opinion might be biased, so I will withdraw from that item on the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. 2025/0116/FUL. That's my application, so I will leave the meeting at that point.
Thank you. And just for myself, as 20/024/0403, I was in the same political party as the applicant, but I'm also, one of my closest friends is also a objector in one of the properties, but my mind is completely open on this and not biased in any way. Is there anybody else who would like to make a declaration? Thank you. Agenda item 4, petitions, deputations and questions. We do have requests to speak this evening. These will be heard under the relevant planning application. An officer will introduce each application and give their recommendations. We will then hear from any member of the public, any parish council representatives, ward members if they're not on the committee, and then from the applicant or their representative before moving to the debate. We now move on to agenda item 5, the planning application. 2023-0632 RES, Allison Homes, Oakham CCRC, Wheatfield Way, Barleythorpe. Approval of reserved matters, layout, scale and appearance of the buildings erected and the landscaping for this phase for 65 dwellings, including 26 one-bedroom apartments in a mews arrangement around a communal garden to be delivered as independent living units relating to the outline planning permission under reference OUT 2009-1306 and the Section 73 application to vary condition 10 of the outline permission. The recommendation is approval subject to conditions. Mr Johnson, would you like to present the report?
Thank you, Chairman. As you've already said, Chairman, the principle of development of the site was established by the outline planning permission back in 2011, and this is a reserved matters application for the wider detail. When the original application was submitted in 2023, it proposed 67 dwellings. Since then, there have been numerous discussions and amendments sought to the scheme. So the application now seeks the approval for 65 dwellings, with 26 of those being assisted independent living units, as you've already said. They would be located on the eastern part of the site and separated from the rest of the site by a line of TPO trees, which I'll show in a minute. As you've already said as well, it's assisted living. It's part of the continuing care retirement communities, or CCRCs, which are long-term care options for older people who want to stay in the same place through different phases of the ageing process. And the assisted living accommodation there, as we said, there'll be 26 units, and that would be a mix of 67% would be rented and 33% would be for general sale, and they'd be restricted to qualifying persons, e.g. those with a local connection and aged over 55, etc. So turning to the actual slide, so you have the application site outlined there in red, located to the north west of the Oakham Centre, part of the urban extension. The site is the last unused parcel of land to be redeveloped as part of that development. There's public open space to the north of the site. You have the Oakham Grange care home just off to the side, and then residential development surrounding the rest of the site. The trees here along the northern element and going through the middle of the site are covered by a tree preservation order, as is a tree, I think it's this tree here, and there's another one here as well that's covered by that TPO. In terms of photographs, this is just looking towards the front of the site. So the site is actually in this area of the development. So you can see the care home here, and the play area to the north of the site is just shown here. And this is the TPO trees that run to the front of the site. Looking south, so this is where one of the new entrants to the site would be, the western part of the site. This is, I think it's this tree here is one tree that needs to be removed to facilitate access and is of low quality. This is a view across the site showing where the market housing would be located. This hedgerow would be removed as part of the development, and the new site entrance comes in at the front here. This is a public footpath that runs east-west along the southern edge of the site, and you can just see in the distance there's a hedgerow along part of this southern boundary, which again is to be retained as part of the development. And this is a shot showing the eastern section of the site from the public footpath. So you've got the care home in the background, and this would be where the assisted living would be located. There are some constraints in this area. There's existing drainage crates which need to be retained as part of the development and can't be built on. Again, this is the other side of the eastern section. So again, this is the section of TPO trees that run through the middle of the site, which again to be retained. And again, this is where the assisted living would be sited. Again, this is just taking a photograph again from the footpath, and again showing the other side of the mature trees. So the assisted living, you can just see the care home in the background. The assisted living would be the other side of these trees, and this side is where the market housing would go. This is just further round where the market housing would go, and the red pointer that you can see there is just pointing where the access comes in. So this is the dwelling that the access is adjacent to, and this dwelling is on the opposite side of the road to where the access is coming in. Again, this is just taken outside the southwest corner of the site looking north, and it just shows the relationship to Haybarn Close properties and Grooms Close properties, which also face the development. So the policies are all set out in the planning report, but they're on the slide there for members, and again the relevant site allocation policies and the neighbourhood plan policies as well. Relevant national planning policy framework, again all of these are in the report, so I don't propose to spend too much time on those. In terms of, this is just a site showing the layout, and just so that you can see, this is the TPO trees that run through the site, and again it's this tree here and this tree here that are also covered by the TPO and are all to be retained as part of the development. So this section of the site, to the east of the site, you can see it says CCRC site. That's where the assisted units will go, and the market housing is on the western side of the site. In terms of the site has been laid out to be designed to provide back-to-back perimeter blocks, active frontages so that there's overlooking natural surveillance. It complies with the Rutland County Council Design Guide and achieves the relevant separation distances. and the hedgerow and tree planting has also been incorporated throughout the development to get additional landscaping. And as I said, the hedgerow along the southern boundary, which is along this boundary here, is to be retained as part of the development. This plan just shows some of the constraints that are on the site. So the light blue areas are where the drainage crates are, so you can't build on top of those. The greyed out lines are where the site drainage easement is. There's a drain that runs, a drainage connection that runs through the centre of the site, and so the access road has been designed to predominantly follow that point there, and buildings set back off it. There's also constraints in terms of the TPO trees and how close you can build within those in the root protection areas. And obviously you've got the existing access as well to the northeast of the site. During the life of the application, there's been numerous consultations with the Lead Local Flood Authority, which has meant additional designs have been put forward. The scheme now proposes flows to discharge to the existing surface water in Maresfield Road at a rate of 7 litres a second, which is the existing rate at that drainage area, and that's highlighted in yellow in the eastern corner there. There's no objection from the Lead Local Flood Authority, and it's important to note that the amendments also ensure now that there is no connection into the Barleythorpe Brook, which was originally proposed but has now been amended out of the scheme. The existing drainage serves the wider development to the north of the site, and that remains running through the site. That is unaffected by the development. In terms of the proposed units, the market housing, 39 are proposed. They're similar in design and materials to the wider urban extension site and are considered appropriate and reflective of other buildings in the area. The independent living units, which was circulated on there, as we said, 26 units, 1-bedroom flats. There's a communal garden area in the centre of the site, and that will be secured via a unilateral undertaking, which again restricts who can take those properties on. And this just shows the general design of the independent units, which again are reflective of the scale of other buildings within that area. Again, this is just a ground floor plan showing effectively kitchen, dining room, living room, bedroom, and then a bathroom, shower room. Highways and access. So there's the existing access to the northeastern side of the site, which serves the assisted living, and that is in this location here. And then this is where the proposed new access is coming in. Again, visibility displays have been looked at closely by Highways and meet all required standards. The parking provision is in line with the relevant policies, and there's no Highways objections to the amended scheme. So, as I've already said, the principle of the use is established by the Outline Planning Permission. There's been previous permission for continued care retirement community on part of the site, but only the care home has been built out. Adult social care team have been included in the discussions and are supportive of the proposed scheme. I've talked about the revised scheme. And given the changes to the adult social care and the number of care homes that we've got in the area now, what is proposed before us is actually meeting a need for residents within the area. Main issues, there's been numerous objections received from residents living close to the site, and they're detailed in the report. The layout has been revised several times in order to address these concerns, issues around connectivity across the site. We've talked about the perimeter blocks and the active frontages, etc., and the hedgerows and being retained. The density, it is less than 40 dwellings to the hectare, but this is considered acceptable because of all the constraints on the site. You just can't achieve 40 dwellings to the hectare and get an acceptable scheme. The houses provides a large mix of 2 and 3 bed properties, and 41% of the units provided will be 1 bed. Talked about highways being acceptable. The Highway Authority have got no objections to the revised plans, subject to a number of conditions which require wheel washing during construction phase, construction management plan, securing the relevant parking and turning facilities, completion of the roads, the visibility displays, pedestrian visibility displays, off-site highway works, lighting, and securing the surface water drainage as well. Again, as I've already said, drainage has been looked at by the lead local flood authority, subject to the restriction of the 7 litres per second, and there being no discharge into the Barleythorpe Brook. It's considered that the drainage is acceptable and addresses the concerns of the development. Ecology is an issue that is outstanding, and there are badgers on the site. There's currently monitoring being undertaken in relation to that badger set. It's due to end tomorrow. There has been, I think, low-level use by badgers of the site, but it is considered that the assessment that's been submitted by the applicant looks at it on a worst-case basis. Ecology weren't happy to sign off until that monitoring had been completed, so the recommendation is that if members are minded to approve the application, that it be deferred to the chairman, subject to the outstanding ecology issue being resolved, which we anticipate that will be later this week or next. Landscaping, the trees are proposed to be retained on the site, and there's, as I said, there's 1 poor specimen along the southern edge which is to be removed, and there's 1 poor specimen again to facilitate the access on the northern side. The development will be close to the TPO trees, but it is outside of the root protection area of them, and there is additional tree planting and hedge planting proposed, and the development also includes street trees, which will also help the environment and the visual amenity of the development as well. So in conclusion, the plans have been revised following consultation and address a number of the concerns, or all of the concerns put forward. The application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions attached, the unilateral undertaking that's been drafted, and subject to it being deferred to the chairman and vice to resolve the ecology issues, which, as again I've said, that the monitoring has been done on a worst case scenario, and we believe that that should be able to be signed off satisfactorily shortly after a decision's made. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, can I ask our first speaker, Councillor Tracy Carr, who's ward member? Thank you. Tracy, you know you've got 5 minutes when you start speaking. Thank you.
And forgive me, I'm a little bit rusty. I'm just coming back from a big operation, so if I stumble across my words, please bear that in mind. So, firstly, thank you, Chair and the committee, for the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you for the presentation and the photographs, but I'm here to talk about the reality and to give some context. I speak as a resident and the elected ward member for Barleythorpe. Now, to be clear, this is not an objection to the development, but more about the reiteration of this planning application and its wider impact on the houses surrounding this area. When myself and other residents purchased our homes, we were shown detailed plans on one of these areas of what we're discussing tonight. As well as a care home, which is now in situ, we were led to believe that the remaining land would be used for single-storey accommodation similar to Huntsman Drive, i.e. retirement, supported and independent living. What we now have is a proposal for 65 houses of different sizes, which goes from the original plan of 43. And only 26 of these are designated as independent living accommodation. I and other residents understand that this is a difficult decision for the committee, but we would be grateful if you consider the things that I'm about to raise with you. In 2023, Allison Homes commissioned their own ecological report that highlighted concerns about trees and hedges, and this report recommended that these needed to be preserved. The report also highlighted the activity wildlife in this area, namely badgers and bats. There was also a lot of reference to the draining system, and as you're aware, in January 2024, homes in close proximity to this land were flooded. So I do have to ask how this can be deemed as a low flood risk area. I know, and I'm sure you will have received comprehensive and compliant reports that give detailed insurance plans. But unfortunately, this is not shared by residents. And as indicated by your photographs, I've got a very, very different set of photographs. The wheels of Allison Homes turn slowly. Areas that were started 14, 15 years ago still haven't been completed, and road adoption seems to get further and further away. What this means for residents is that it's a free-for-all. Parking and driving is a daily challenge, and there are many incidents of dangerous parking on corners, opposite junctions, across driveways and fully on paths. How nothing serious has happened is luck and fortune, and that thankfully emergency vehicles haven't been held up. But I do have photographs and video footage of cars driving fully on pavements to avoid gridlock. The estate becomes an overspill car park for school drop-offs and pickups, as well as being a car park for when there are large events at the showground. This isn't a criticism, it's a reality. There are also safety concerns about when work starts. The development is adjacent to a large and popular play park, which doesn't seem to feature in any of these photographs. This isn't fully enclosed. So where will the vehicles, the machinery, the workforce, where will they park and how will they access the site? Parking in this area is already problematic. You only have to visit on a weekday to see the parking on a corner outside the care home, which means visibility is very difficult, and there's more of a hope for the best approach when navigating the estate roads. Barleythorpe has been one of the largest developments in Rutland, and we feel forgotten and unheard. So before Allison Homes breaks ground, please consider how 65 homes will impact on existing houses and in the area, especially homes that will lose light. It's been suggested that Allison Homes are proactively seeking solutions for drainage. Well, these need to be confirmed and they need to be adequate before any work starts. Also, what are Allison Homes going to do to address the issues that were highlighted in their commissioned ecological report, i.e. the impact on the environment? We would also like assurance from Allison Homes that they will complete the rest of the estate to a good standard before any further work starts. If road adoption can't be completed, at least make a start and have a detailed and timetable plan which is regularly reviewed. Also consider the route to the development and ensuring it is via Hackamore Way and not through the estate. I see daily heavy load lorries, tractors, etc. driving the length of Marefield Road, which weaves and turns and again has problematic parking along it. And finally, for Allison Homes to be completely transparent with residents, with regular updates, resident engagement and any concerns or issues to be dealt with promptly and to a satisfactory standard. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Members of the committee, questions, please. Councillor Andrew Brown.
Thank you, Chair. And welcome back, Councillor Carr. Who led you to believe that there'd be single-storey homes, firstly, and secondly, would a residence permit scheme help alleviate with parking at all?
Well, okay, there's a couple of things there. So firstly, when I bought my house in 2017, the developers, and for disclosure, I bought from my house is Bellway, gave a very detailed plan of all the areas where the open spaces were going to be. And we were led to believe that, yes, a care home was going to go on a particular site, not a problem. And in keeping with a care home environment, that would be single storey, one bedroomed houses, very similar to what's on Huntsman's Drive. Given that independent living, for some people, I'm not entirely sure how they're going to get to a second story, actually. I know from my own experience of having somebody in care who was at Huntsman Drive wouldn't be able to have climbed stairs. I don't know if standard lifts are going in, but the plan was, or so we were led to believe, that these would single-storey homes. And when I have spoken to residents at some of our surgeries, they were people who have bought houses within that vicinity were also led to believe, and which is why they purchased them, because they didn't think they were going to have any blockage of views and light, and that's not the case.
So it was Allison Homes that led
Yes.
you, right?
And within terms of parking permits, well, this is an interesting one because each home does have their designated parking. However, as I've pointed out, it's a free-for-all because there's no way of policing it, for the want of the better word. And I get emails constantly around residents who've got 2 designated parking will find people parking in their designated areas. I don't know how we stop it, even if we had... The only way I think we could do it, which I'm not keen on, is having a parking system that's similar to other estates where you have literally got to have a valid permit for that area. But getting visitors to that area is a challenge. And just to go on to the parking, the care home, which sits right on the corner, doesn't seem to have adequate parking for staff and visitors. And therefore, if you go, as I pointed out in my report, if you go down there, you are literally faced with a line of cars going all the way around the corner, making visibility almost impossible. So I've got real concerns when this development starts with all the heavy machinery, all the workforce, all those vehicles. How on earth is that going to make it easier for the people that currently live there just to navigate their day-to-day lives?
Thank you. Other members? Councillor Ray Payne.
You mentioned the issue of flooding, which I don't live in Barleythorpe, I live in Oakham, but I've heard the howls of anguish coming from Barleythorpe over the years about the problems they've had with flooding there. What's your take on what this development will do to that situation?
I'm not an expert on flood risks nor on planning, as you probably have worked out, but I am very passionate about this area. And I have to say, I hadn't seen anything quite like it. Now, I've lived in this area for a long time, and yes, we can say it was unprecedented rain and storms that gave us the flooding. However, when you consider where the flooding occurred, which is a stone's throw from this development, I've never seen anything quite like it. I've got to be honest with you. And I was utterly shocked by the level and speed at which the areas flooded around it was around sort of Stud Road area there, and people had to be moved out, you know, and again, trying to address the issue of flooding and get some support and help for the estate, you are passed from pillar to post, around who was going to take some responsibility and accountability. And I am very grateful to the community for the community response team from the council, who did come to the aid of a vulnerable person who lives down there, who was really badly affected. But that was it. That was all that they could do in their gift, because it's not adopted, and therefore it doesn't come under the same remit as other areas that are flooded, which is why I really wanted strongly to advocate for areas that are not adopted. And the fact that there are some areas of the estate that are 15 years old and we're still talking about road adoption is, I think, quite shocking and appalling.
Thank you. Councillor David Wilby.
Thank you, Chair. I sympathise with the parking side and also the flooding, which I think on several of the estates that we see developing seem to be lacking, in my humble opinion. But can someone just show me, given that this is an assisted living thing, where the emergency vehicles would be able to get to all the houses?
Sorry, Chairman. The emergency vehicles would have access through, so you come through here and you come in and they can access to this location here and to here as well. And there's also access along here, so they can get access to all of the properties, for the assisted ones, and again all of the properties have access. In terms of the parking, all of the properties on the site have designated parking spaces. You can see them all adjacent there. I think this is something that we have taken on board in terms of the way the wider estate has been built previously, and some of the issues that we've had in terms of parking on the highway. A lot of that is caused because of them not having direct parking adjacent to the property. So that's what we've tried to incorporate in this, so that all of the properties have parking directly adjacent to them, rather than having to park on the highway itself, which is, I think, what's caused the problem elsewhere across the Barleythorpe estate.
Councillor Ray Payne.
Yep, taking that on board, nevertheless, previous history, which should always inform the situation we're in, the omens are not good. What the Councillor Carr has said are facts. People are living with these problems, and I've heard a lot about this estate, and I've heard a lot about the problems, and I don't even live there. So I'm afraid I want a bit more than good intentions from the developer. I'd like to see some concrete evidence, and at the moment that's singularly lacking, it seems to me.
Yes, Justin.
So, Chair, I mean, obviously, the applicants here and can talk about things, but what I would say from an officer side of things is that the way the estate was laid out and designed from a parking point of view, I think we have learnt from some of the problems that have been caused elsewhere, and that those same designs haven't been incorporated in this. This is why each of the properties, as you can see on the site, has got their parking, 2 or 3 spaces, directly adjacent to it, and there's additional visitor parking around the CCRC site as well, so that they have their own parking and it's available next to their dwelling, and not therefore meaning that, I think the issue on the other wider site has been that the parking is not directly adjacent to the front door. So what that means is that people have been bouncing up the curb and parking on that, rather than parking in their designated spot, possibly at the rear of their properties. That is a completely different design to how this has been done, because we have sought to learn those lessons.
Just to reiterate for the committee, we are considering this application. I have total sympathy for the adoption, which seems a very bad position, but tonight we have to consider the application in front of us. Councillor West.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Carr, assuming we can police it, do you think a residence parking permit scheme would make an appreciable difference and tip the balance in favour of a more enjoyable residential experience?
In all honesty, I don't know, because I think there's fors and against. I think that would have to go out to consultation. I think when you look at the areas within Rutland that are permit, they bring the challenges, and I know that some are very restricted, even to visitors who can only, it's something ridiculous like you can only visit sort of 6 times a year or something ridiculous. And I think having areas that are permit only will only create issues for the rest of the estate where there won't be any, because I will tell you now, until the roads are adopted, and I know this is about the planning, but this is about the wider repercussions, until the roads are adopted and there's clear road markings and double yellow lines and no parking zones, you're just going to get the same amount of issues. And in terms of the vehicle access, the emergency vehicle access, God willing, nobody's parking along that road because he'll not get through. And that really does need to take some consideration. So I agree with Councillor Payne that goodwill will not suffice.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Councillor Carr has mentioned the play park, which is opposite the main exit to this site.
Sorry, Councillor Smith, is this a question for Councillor Carr, or is this a general comment which we can pick up in
I was
debate?
going to make a general comment. Do you want to make that later, Chair?
Yeah, that's probably best picked up
Okay,
during the
thank
general
you.
debate, as opposed to this is just for questions for Councillor Carr. Any further questions? Thank you, Tracy. Good to see you back. Can I ask Georgina McRae, the applicant, to come forward, please? Georgina, you have 3 minutes from when you start speaking.
Good evening, members. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I'm Georgina McRae, Planning Director at Allison Homes. This Reserve Matters application was submitted in June 2023 and seeks approval for matters of layout, scale and appearance relating to the last unused parcel of land planned for development under the Oakham North Urban Extension. This site has been subject to various reserve matters dating back to 2014, including a part implemented approved scheme for over 100 flats in a 2-storey arrangement in addition to the now constructed 60-bedroom Oakham Grange care home. As detailed in your officer's report, the landscaping surrounding local housing need has changed significantly in the last 14 years since the outline planning permission was granted, including the development of a number of other care homes and retirement schemes in Oakham, with provision now exceeding demand and units laying vacant. The proposal before you this evening has evolved through close engagement with officers and your adult social care team over the last year and is considered to meet more up-to-date identified local housing need, whilst better reflecting the site constraints and immediate built surroundings. In place of the previously approved 100 flats, the scheme now proposes 26 assisted or independent living properties to be delivered as fully affordable housing. This is equivalent to 40% of the scheme, and 35 open market homes, providing for first-time buyers and downsizers, with a focus on small 2- and 3-bedroom properties. This is fully supported by officers and your adult social care team and is considered to meet both an acceptable and deliverable use of the site. All homes will be built with energy efficiency and sustainability at the forefront, with electric vehicle charging provided to every plot, electric heating and solar PV panels. With regards to highways and drainage, Allison Homes have worked closely with officers to overcome objections and separately to this application continue to work with the lead local flood authority in their investigations of the nearby Barleythorpe Brook flooding in January 2024. The surface water drainage from this site is now proposed to discharge into an existing 7-trench sewer in Maresfield Road, with on-site attenuation restricting the discharge to the current approved rate of 7 litres per second. As concluded in your officer's report, it's considered the proposals would amount to appropriate sustainable development and would accord with the outline planning permission and development plan policies. Members, I hope you're able to support this application in line with your officer's recommendations, but I am happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Members. Councillor Karen Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on this question of adoption of the roads, and I'm not local, so I don't understand the history of it.
Yeah.
Little bit alarmed that it's such a big problem. Will the same problem happen on this site?
Yeah, I fully understand and appreciate the frustrations that have been raised tonight. I think I'm happy to give my perspective. Hopefully Highways are able to speak as well, but I think there's been a lot of work over the last 2 years since the transition from Larkfleet to Allison Homes to address a lot of the outstanding works. I do acknowledge there's some outstanding, but there's been huge strides in the last few years to get roads onto maintenance with the council and to get as many of those adopted. There's still way to go, but I'd like to hear if Highways agree with that.
Julie, do you want to comment? Yeah, no, you can do in response to that question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've been working very closely with Allison Homes and their consultant and their contractors, and we're working on a programme through the entire site. There's a huge amount of work that's been going on in the background, doing all the CCTV of the drainage systems, etc. The major hold-up of the entire site has been the adoption of the sewers, which we can't adopt the highways until the main sewers are adopted. So, but that's progressing as well. So now we can start looking at the highways. So it's getting certification for all the street lighting. Obviously, you wouldn't want us to adopt roads if their street lighting's not working or the gully connections are, need repairing. So, so we're working throughout the entire site with Allison Homes. I mean, we're literally in communication with them every day. So in terms of adoption, obviously you cannot adopt, but we wouldn't be able to adopt these roads once they're built until the connecting one is adopted. So it has to work from the public highways on the outside of the site and work inwards. And each one as they connect through, that's how they get in that order, that's how they get adopted. I will just say on the drainage side of things, obviously there's no drainage now. It's the design's been changed so that there's no new surface water that's being connected to the Barleythorpe Brook. So that's not a material consideration for this application. However, again, we've been working very closely with Allison Homes to look at improvements to the Barleythorpe Brook, looking at, and there are numerous different issues that led to certain flooding events. Obviously, it's being investigated under the Section 19 report. However, officers have been doing work in the background on that as well. But as I say, that's aside from this application, because the surface water drainage is now going into Maresfield Road, which connects to the brook much further on down near Land's End Way. I will just say on the parking issue, I do personally feel that there isn't sufficient parking for the existing care home. However, that was determined under that planning application, and those parking levels that would have been approved by committee at the time for those, so in terms of parking permits, I don't really want to say much on that, but in terms of having double yellows and parking restrictions put in place, that again, this is nothing to do with this application, but for your information, even because the roads are dedicated as public highway, even though they're not adopted, you can still have traffic regulation orders put on those roads and they can be enforced. So that may be something that can address, but that's not for this developer to do. That's something that councillors or whoever can come to us and investigate that further. I think that all. Does that cover everything?
No, thank you, Julie. So I saw a hand up at this end. Sorry, do you want to come back on that, Councillor Payne?
No, it's a different question.
Okay, we'll
you
give
want.
you a rest. Councillor Corby?
Thank you, Chair. Flooding. I know, take Julie's point that it's not a material consideration for this particular development. However, I believe it is, and I'm not convinced at all at the moment with regard to that aspect of it. I'm looking at just MPF paragraph 170, which talks about inappropriate development in areas of risk of flooding should be avoided by directing development away from areas at the highest risk. Where development is necessary in such areas, the development should be made safe for its lifetime.
So is this a question for the...
Well, it may be for... I'm directing at Alison's Homes, to be honest with you, Chair.
Okay, if it is a question, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so, therefore, the development should be made safe for its lifetime without risking flood elsewhere. We've seen the flooding already. We can see that you're mitigating against, but there's still that flood sewer plant or going into the brook from the other areas through that site. So I'm looking for 100% reassurance that even with that, this site is not going to be flooded. Are you confident throughout the lifetime of the development?
We're confident that this site won't be flooded. That doesn't take away the issues that have been experienced in the Barleythorpe Brook, and we're not walking away from the responsibilities of that because our drainage is going elsewhere. As Julie mentioned, the Section 19 report that the council are doing at the moment, we've done a lot of work in the background to support that investigation. So we've carried out a number of CCTV surveys of one of the 900 millimetre culvert, the head wall at the top of that. We're working with the lead local authority to replace, because the feeling is that that was insufficient and part of the reason for the flooding. We've also done a number of tests on the water that's going into the brook, so chlorination tests, because there is some possible water going in there from somewhere in the development. And we also believe that there is a constant surface water discharge into that site, which would mean that there's some groundwater flooding in another development parcel. So we've got a good understanding of what's going into that brook and reducing the capacity, which means we're not going to put this site into there and exacerbate an issue. And we are working with the lead local flood authority to stop any further flooding. We've got a team out there at the moment that monitors that head wall constantly and responds to any emergency calls to clear it. That's obviously a responsibility we want to obviously get rid of in time, so it's in our interest to sort the issue in the Barleythorpe Brook out. But in terms of this site, it doesn't discharge into there. It's much further downstream.
Okay, thank you. So in your conditions there at the moment, it's proposed that any private areas of hard standing should be designed and constructed to prevent the discharge of private surface water onto any existing proposed highway. How do you propose to do that in terms of the surface water from private areas of land? I mean, going forward, people may well want to put block paving on their slabs, on their driveways. A lot of people just don't want grass in the gardens these days. That all adds up. And over 65 houses over a lifetime, there's got to be a consideration.
Yeah, so obviously the greenfield runoff from that site at the moment goes towards Barleythorpe Brook. We'll be capturing that on site. We'll be storing that in attenuation crates mainly. There's permeable paving on there, so private drainage will go going into a pipe system and discharging out to the east of the site into Maresfield Road into the sewer. So effectively any greenfield runoff from that site currently will be captured in our scheme, attenuated on site and then discharged at a controlled rate into a sewer away from the flooded area of the Barleythorpe Brook.
So Justin, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, Chair, I was just going to say, in terms of the question about what people may do in future with their gardens, such as hard surface and things like that, under permitted development restrictions, or permitted development rights, you can only hard surface things to a certain amount if it's not permeable. So provided it's permeable, you can do so much. If it's not, then it may well require planning permission. So that again is because of all of the issues we've had with surface water drainage across the country. Sorry, as legal pointed out, there's also condition 10 that covers the restrictions as well.
Thank you. Councillor Payne, Karen Payne, you had another question?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think you mentioned when you were speaking previously that surface water drainage was being fed into a Severn Trent sewer, is that right? I've been doing some work in another area with another water company who strongly object to surface water drainage being fed into their foul water system because it drives it over capacity that they haven't planned for. What assurances can you give me that Severn Trent know about this and have agreed that you can feed the surface water drainage through their sewer system, please? And there aren't any capacity issues.
So it's not going into a foul water sewer, it's going into surface water sewer, so it's not combined. We've been in discussions with Severn Trent, who have no objection, subject to the LLFA having no objection. As I said, we're controlling at the same rate that's currently going into there from the care home. So once, if planning permission is issued, we'd have to go through the Section 106 process with Severn Trent to secure our point of connection.
Thank you. Councillor Wise.
Thank you. We've got evidence in the report that says we don't need another care home in Oakham. We probably don't need one in Rutland, to be honest. But I haven't seen any evidence that this more limited number of assisted living is sufficient. We've already heard tonight that it was originally planned to be a much larger number of assisted living. And certainly from my work as councillor, I know of a lot of people who are looking for assisted living. Do you have any evidence that this number is sufficient for the demand?
I think having worked with the adult social care team over the last year and during their preparations of the evidence for the local plan, the evidence have come from that team to say this is now what's needed rather than the additional care homes. So the provision of those units has really been led by the adult social care team. We've done a lot of work with providers, so we spent probably 6 to 8 months of last year working with officers and St John, St Anne to offer units to them. They didn't see a need in this location, which is why we've broadened out the range of those, and we've prepared the unilateral undertaking to make sure they go to a registered provider to take people off the council's housing register into either affordable rented housing or affordable home ownership.
Yes, Councillor Wise.
Can I just follow up on that? I was going to raise, actually, no, in this report we mention affordable homes, and of course we have a requirement for a percentage. And I was pleased to hear in your introduction you mentioned the affordable homes. Can I ask why that isn't made much clearer? Because another developer would come along and say, well, they haven't put any affordable homes. It's not written in the report that I've got, I don't think, unless I've missed it, that they are affordable homes.
It might be a question for officers. It's covered in the unilateral undertaking, so that's the purpose of that document, is to secure these as affordable homes and secure the tenure of those units.
Justin, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I think there was a requirement under the original Section 106 agreement for the wider site, or sorry, it wasn't a Section 106, it was, just bear with me, let me just find the terminology because it got changed.
I think it was a Section 111.
That's what I'm looking for. So it's a Section 111 legal agreement that in effect acts as a similar way to a Section 106 agreement. So the affordable housing requirements across the site have been complied with for the wider site. However, although this is just an element of it, effectively the unilateral will secure it as a form of affordable as well. But the wider site and the outline permission, that affordable housing has been met across the wider site. This is only part of the whole outline application, which needs to be also remembered.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions from members? Councillor McRobb.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm picking up on something that Councillor Carr said earlier. I understood from the officer's presentation that the independent living units on this site are 1 bedroom. And I was surprised then, perhaps I made a mistake in my interpretation, but I was surprised to see what looked like 2-storey houses. And I'd just like some clarification of whether these 2-storey houses are indeed 1-bedroom independent living units, and how appropriate that is thought to be, because like Councillor Carr, I can think of a number of people who might be suitable for independent supported living units who would not be able to get upstairs without a stair lift or something of that kind.
Yeah, so there's a mixture provided. So they're apartments, so they're single story. So some are ground floor, some are first floor. They're built to meet M42, so accessible. And then the ground floor, M43, so wheelchair. So effectively, there's a selection of different kinds there, some being assisted living, some being independent living.
Okay, thank you.
Members, any final questions? In that case, thank you very much. Members, we now go to general debate. Councillor Tim Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask my question now then? Councillor Carr mentioned the play park, which is opposite, pretty well opposite the main exit for this proposed development. Also, another resident pointed this out. I just wondered if we know the main exit site for this play park for the children and their parents and carers, and has anything been put in place to ensure their safety, given, as we've heard, there seem to be a lot of traffic problems and parking problems. Thank you.
Chairman, there's nothing being put in specifically. Obviously, if you look at the aerial photograph there, the play space is this area in here, and you can see that there are roads all the way round the actual play area. The addition of a single access point at this location, I don't consider to raise any significant issues. Obviously, it's been assessed by highways, and that's not only in terms of vehicle traffic, but also pedestrian traffic as well. There's a footpath that runs along the road, and I don't believe that this development would result in any significant adverse impact on the users of that play space, no more so than any of the other roads that are around that site.
Questions for Councillor Andrew Brown?
Thank you, Chair. I've got various questions. Do you want me to go through them one at a time? That'd be easier.
Yes, please do.
Paragraph 60 on page 32, subparagraph 3. There's no dimensions, and therefore they can't assess the proposed highway infrastructure. So when will this assessment be done? Or has it already been done?
I believe those comments relate to concerns that were raised originally, and it's been superseded through the amendment.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. And then on page 48, there's this is the requesting SIL healthcare contributions, but on page 28 it says no SIL is going to be forthcoming because it's already reached the maximum contributions. Is that not a contradiction?
No. Again, I think there's been a request, but as has already been said, the 115 agreement, all the contributions have already been paid on this site.
So they're requesting them, but does that mean they're not going to get anything?
There is no more to be paid because they were all paid when that agreement was sent. So when that agreement was signed, it took into account everything for the wider site that would be coming, and so
Right.
they've already effectively paid what is due.
So their request is not going to
No.
be forthcoming, presumably. On page 44, we've got further comments. And the further comments are dated 24th of the 5th, 2025. So that presumably is not right.
No, I believe it should probably be 2024.
Okay.
Sorry.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions from members? Councillor Ray Payne.
Not strictly speaking a question, Chair, but as someone who's lived in Oakham a few years now, and I've heard that, you know, by default, the problems in this area, I'm struggling with, frankly, this company has a credibility problem with me. I can't forget the problems of their previous work, and I'm not yet hearing anything that makes me feel convinced we won't have a rerun. It's you have to judge people on their record, and I'm afraid on that score, I'm not impressed at the moment, and I'm just having all sorts of problems with this, quite frankly.
Justin, can you clarify? I believe it was a different developer, was it not?
Well, I think there has been changes at the company. I think it was Larkfleet originally. It's now Allison Homes, and I think there have been changes at senior level at the company. Notwithstanding that fact, members have to determine the application based on its planning merits and not who may be or who is developing the site.
Thank you. Yes, Julie.
Thank you, Chair. Just if I can give you a bit of assurance, when I've been here over 4 years now, so originally it was Larkfleet, and we struggled to get any conversations going with them and trying to progress adoption. But since Allison Homes and the senior management, including Georgina, has been on board, we've seen massive progression. And I know you can't physically see it out there, but there's a lot of work being done. So I've witnessed a considerable change of, yeah.
I'll take that then. Obviously, I take what an officer says. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor West, did you have a question? Was it your hand that went up?
It did, you're right, it did. I was just thinking, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to phrase it yet. I was just coming to Julie's idea.
Would you like me to go to Councillor McRobb while you...
Yeah, go on, go for it. Yeah.
Councillor McRobb.
Thank you. Second best. Yes, I noticed in the report that the design of the drainage system now involves Severn Trent rather than Anglian Water. And I seem to get from the report the impression that Severn Trent had not commented or responded to consultation. I wondered if that was still true, and if it is, how much of an issue that is.
It is true. As a planning authority, we have sent them numerous consultations on the application. They haven't responded, and therefore we have to take it as they have no objection to it. That being said, obviously we've had discussions with Julia's lead local flood authority, and the rate that they are proposing to discharge into Severn Trent Water's system is at the same rate that is currently there. So what will happen is the water will effectively be held on site and discharge into the existing connection at the same rate that it already does. So from a planning point of view, we don't see why they would wish to object to that. And in any event, if planning permission is granted, the developer would need to get formal agreement from Severn Trent at that point. Clearly, if that didn't happen, then they would have to come back and agree a different solution that again was found to would have to meet all of our requirements. But again, because they're discharging at the existing rate that connection takes, I don't believe that they will object to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor West.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering, Julie, what would we have to do to get double yellow lines or yellow lines somewhere on the unadopted roads? Is that an easy process that we can do elsewhere out of this meeting?
Yes, I was just going to reiterate, obviously it's nothing to do with this application, but yes, an inquiry can be sent through to either the Highways inbox or to, it's the Highways inbox now because it's transferred to somebody else. So you do that.
Cool, thank you. And secondly, this is only a minor thing, the hedge on the southern side, in the condition that is to be kept no lower than 2 metres. Did we just in to have some sort of condition on maintenance of it as well, so that it remains a hedge and doesn't just simply grow and grow and grow up and up and up and becomes more of a an unmanageable accumulation of very tall hedge plants with no lower shielding?
I mean, I don't think we could. It'd be difficult to insist on that. I think the condition that we've got obviously seeks its retention and maintained at a minimum of 2 metres. Clearly, if it goes too high and was causing a problem from an amenity point of view or anything like that, then there's high hedge legislation that would cover any complaints and could be looked at in terms of that. I think if it wasn't maintained, it's most likely to have impact on the occupiers of the development that's proposed by this. So I would have thought the occupiers of those properties would want to maintain it themselves because it's directly south to those properties. So in theory, it would be blocking out their garden light rather than any adjacent properties. There are none directly to the south of it.
Thanks, Justin. I'm just conscious that in this day and age, that sort of thing is always someone else's job, and how would we make people aware that they're allowed to do that? They're allowed to go and trim the hedge.
Well, it's right. It would be running along the back garden, so it would.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay.
In terms of the properties, if I pull up the plan. So, well, it's running along the side of the properties here, so it would either be maintained by the properties here, depending on the covenants of that, or the landscape management company for the site.
Thank you, members. Councillor Ellison.
That's one of those stupid questions as usual. Is it possible to add a planning requirement to provide more parking spaces, particularly for the care home?
No, the care home is completely separate to the application, and we can't require anything on that. In terms of the site itself, there's been a lot of discussion with the applicant, and we've gone back to them numerous times, and they have increased the number of parkings now so that it meets our standards, and therefore we can't insist on any more.
Thank you. Councillor Corby.
Thanks, Chair. Judy, for me again, sorry, maybe it's me being a bit thick here, but I'm still concerned about the flooding situation. On the papers there, paragraph 51, where it states that on the basis of the revised proposal and that the rate would not be higher than 7 litres, presume a second or whatever, i.e. no extra load on the system, the lead local flood authority have no objection to the proposal as revised. 7 litres means nothing to me, 7 litres a second means nothing to me, but given the storms and the recent issues over the winter, the last year or two there, what happens if the rate is higher than that? And is it possible, is that a capacity that's, evermore, you know what I'm saying here. It just concerns me still that we've had the flooding up the road. I'm not 100% convinced that the capacity has changed. I understand from the applicant about the storage of water on site, but I'm still concerned that, this 7 litres a second or whatever it means. Can you just go through that with me and give us some reassurance or advice on that, please?
Through you, Chair. So it's restricted to 7 litres per second by virtue of a structure that will restrict it to 7 litres per second, so it can never be any more. The detailed design of the drainage, the revised one, I mean, there was a detailed drainage design but that was when it was going into Barleythorpe Brook. So now they've changed it. Basically, the detailed design for the on-site storage for worst case scenario will have to come in as a discharge of condition, and then we will ensure, or there's a new floods risk officer now, she will review that at the time and ensure that the capacity is there, the storage capacity is there for the absolute worst case scenario. And possibly by the time she looks at it, she might add on a further factor for, you know, as you say, we are getting increasingly regular and intensified storms. So, yeah, so that will be assured. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Wise?
Sorry, I'm back to the parking for the care home. Having tried to park there, I know it's hard work. I have concerns for the parking spaces allocated to these assisted living places, and I would just wondered if we could flag it up and ask the developer to apply suitable notices that make horrendously clear that there is to be no parking from the care home in this area. Those 2 visitor spaces, for example, are just going to become care home spaces. They really are. Their parking is all the way down the road. I think when the parking was planned, it was planned for the number of employees, and they didn't allow for the fact that we don't abandon people in care homes anymore, that we go and visit them. And that's the very transient parking you get from visitors.
Justin, do you want to come back on that?
Chairman, I don't think it's something that we can secure by way of a planning condition or anything like that, but obviously the agents, applicants are here, and I'm sure I've heard what you've said, and in any event I would have thought that they and the residents would want to ensure that those parking spaces are available for them and only them or their visitors.
Members, further questions? Any more questions? Councillor Ellison, Councillor Wise? Thank you. If there's no further questions, we now move to the recommendation to approve. Please cover a proposer, Councillor West, and a seconder, Councillor Karen Payne. All those in favour? Against? Abstentions?
I mean, 11 for, 1 abstention. That's carried, Chair.
Thank you. We now move on to item 5B 2024-0403, Mrs. Titterton Foxfield House, Exton Road, Whitwell, a Section 73 application to retrospectively vary Condition 2, Condition 4, Condition 6, 7, 10, 11 and 12 on application 2020-0034, proposed single-storey, 3-bedroom, earth-sheltered dwelling on land off Exton Road, Whitwell. The recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions. Mr. Milne, would you like to present the report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here we have the site location outlined in red. As you can see here, there's a little table to the left there, shows in green the extent of the conservation area in Whitwell. The hatched buildings being the listed buildings in the locality. You can see the site adjoins the Whitwell Conservation boundary. There was a listed home farm to the south of the site, and that's the only listed building to the same side of the road as the application site. The car park, which serves the Noel Arms Public House, is in close proximity to the extreme eastern side of the site, and that's where the beginnings of the Viking Way starts and runs along the eastern boundary of the site also. Here we have an aerial photograph. You can see the site is accessed from the western part of the site off Exton Road, and it's got a track that runs relatively centrally through the site. There is a band of mature planting that cuts the site in half near enough. As you can see, this is the church to the elevated south of the site, and there are residential properties whose rear gardens directly above the southern aspect of the site. The application site is retrospective. and as such development on site has commenced. A large part of the dwelling has amended, which are shown within the submitted plans of the current application, has been constructed. This includes the main body of the house, including a section of gabion walling and an excavation to the rear, which allows for parking. Bit of site history. The original application was refused by the local authority. It went to appeal and was subsequently allowed an appeal. The inspector included various conditions on that decision. With respect to the current application, this was submitted following an investigation by our own enforcement team, who have been assessing changes to the scheme since the inspector's decision, and these include those relating to the building's appearance and dimensions. Some site photographs. This is the view of the access, view looking directly east from the Exton Road. You can just see the property there in the background. Further on up that track now, you can see this is the front elevation of the dwelling as built, with a track that runs round to the rear where the parking is provided. Now there's construction of an earth bunding to the right hand side. This is a more updated picture of the front elevation showing the recent insertion of a flue which serves a wood burner. And this is the north end elevation as completed, showing the earth covering and gabion walling. This is now the rear elevation. As you can see, this is where the area that's where the vehicles are going to be parked, in the beginnings of the walling to the back, the retaining gabion stone walling. Further round where the walling is being constructed and still under construction. And this is the southern end elevation, which remains unfinished. There is a planning condition, which is condition number 11, which sets a time frame for the completion of this end elevation. And these are various views. This is now when we're back to the residence properties on the southern elevation, looking back towards the dwelling. It gives you an indication of the size and length of the earth bunding that's been erected. And here we have a further view from the southern boundary. This gives you an indication of the tree planting that can be seen in the context of the dwelling that will provide further screening. So I've included a couple of internal pictures of the dwelling. So you can see the open plan nature of it. There are various little rooms either end of the dwelling, which I'll show you on the layout plans. The relevant planning policies are included within the report. Now to the plans and drawings. Here we have the plans showing the access from the western site, with the access track running through the site, going through that hedgerow, with the access track spinning around the rear of the property. It's basically north to south orientated, with a more so a westerly view, front facing elevation, and you can see the earth bunding to the south of the site. These are the proposed front and rear elevations, noting the stone gabion walling wings to either side, and the stone elevation to the front elevation, which still includes a large amount of glazing openings. These are the proposed end elevation. Note the proposed south elevation. This is the elevation or end of the dwelling that is incomplete. The condition is such that it will be completed in accordance with that drawing, which will obviously be earth covered and seeded. This gives you an indication of the proposed front elevation against what was approved. Below, you can see the glazing to the approved elevation, to the below elevation, and you can note the difference on the top elevation includes the gabion stone walling. I'll come to this later on in my presentation, but that gives you an indication of the comparison. And the rear elevation mainly looks the same, other than the addition of the stone gabion walling to the rear, to the wings to the side. This was the approved internal layout plan, and this is the proposed layout plan. This shows you it's a bit more open plan, but includes similar types of rooms, but also does include the addition of 2 rooms, little rooms to both end elevations. This is the proposed section above and the previous section below. There is a condition number 13, which which refers to this plan at the top, because this is where the solar array is going to be affixed to provide electricity which will feed back into the grid, given a time frame for that to be erected. Here's the proposed drainage and landscaping plan. It will be a soakaway crated system and a sewage treatment plant here to the south, just next to the earth bunding. And there are various planting adjacent to the Viking Way and adjacent to the earth bunding here. This gives you an extent of the proposed residential curtilage. There is a condition that secures that the residential curtilage will not extend any greater than that shown here. This is the land drainage consent plan. I will come back to this plan later in my presentation, but there has been a plan submitted. The Lead Flood Authority have looked at and have no objections. So moving on to the main issues, we stated the main issues to be the suitability of this Section 73 application, the changes in the appearance, dimensions and levels, landscape visual impact, heritage impact, sustainability credentials, impact on private residential amenity and flood risk, and I'll go through each of these main issues. In terms of the Section 73A, we've had comments that questioning the suitability of the use of this particular application. And our Section 73A of the Act provides, among other things, for retrospective planning applications to be made in respect to development which has been carried out without planning permission, and for applications for planning permission to authorise development which has been carried out without complying with some of the planning conditions to which it was subject. It is considered appropriate to consider this application under Section 73A of the Town and Country Planning Act. The consideration of the appropriate nature of assessing the application under Section 73A has been taken, including legal advice. Again, carrying on with Section 73A, it is not an offence to carry out development without first obtaining any planning permission required for it. Section 73 of the Act specifically provides that a grant of planning permission can be given for a development that has already taken place. And regardless of the emotions that can be aroused by someone carrying out development without planning permission, the decision maker must approach a retrospective application seeking to legitimise the development that has already taken place in exactly the same way as a normal application for proposed development. So in terms of the dimension comparisons, I've included this slide. I have included these dimensions within the report for members, and it is clear and undisputed that the dwelling as built is larger than was granted permission, and that has been a larger depth and a larger length of dwelling, and has seen an increase due to this of the floor space, which has been increased also by the two additional rooms that have been put on each end of the property. The dimensions of these rooms have been to the sides, which are obviously to the north and south end, which are a plant room and a room that comes off a master bedroom to provide an ensuite. As I say, this extends off the master bedroom and provides a plant room. It's seen an increase in the overall length of the dwelling, but has also led to the insertion of stone gabions to provide support for this additional area. The length of the northern end gabion installation is approximately 11 metres, and the southern end it curves round with the largest length being 4.2 metres before curving round at 1 metre lengths. And obviously these both ends will be earth covered, one of which has already been completed. In terms of levels, as I previously referred to, levels were agreed at discharge condition. The top drawing shows the drawing that was granted at the discharge of condition application for the original application. Sections have been provided as part of this current application. Exact level details, though, did not form part of the decision issued by the planning inspector. The inspector left it up to local authority to agree those levels. That was discharged under a separate discharge condition application. The levels details reference was 22, 40, 46 dis. We've had our own independent survey carried out September last year, which confirmed that the finished floor level and the roof level were as approved under the discharge of that particular levels condition. So in terms of appearance and the main differences between what has been built, which is the top elevation, and what was approved, which is the bottom elevation, there are large areas of glazing to the front elevation have been removed as part of this amended scheme. This has been due to structural and overheating reasons and replaced with local stone and windows. The enlarged wings to either end of the dwelling are to account for the two rooms that have been added, but still include the main design principles of the original property, in as much they have a stone facade and are earth covered. A central flue has been installed on the front facing elevation. It protrudes over the roof line, but it's coloured black to match the doors and the window frames, and we consider this addition does not demonstrably detract into the design of the main house and will not be visually obtrusive in its own right. So moving on to the landscaping and visual impact, what is beneficial in some respects to a retrospective application is we are able to see it in real time and not rely on CGIs or artists' impressions. Members have carried out a site visit, a quite extensive site visit, of which members were taken to various different views of the property in and around the village. As part of this presentation, I've tried to capture those views that the members saw on that committee site visit. Now, I've provided it in the bottom left-hand corner. These are not to scale, but these are just to give your members an indication of where I've taken these pictures from and the direction of which I am facing. Obviously, the dwelling is in the top left-hand corner of those little plans. Now, this particular photo is a view of the dwelling from the Viking Way as we're walking through the Knoll Arms Beer Garden. This gives members an idea of a view of the height of the dwelling in relation to the land to the rear of the dwelling. Here we see the rear of the dwelling from further round the Viking Way, looking directly to the rear of the property. Only the top section, the rear elevation, can be seen. This will be further concealed once that end elevation is finished with the earth covering. As you can see, this is the end elevation here I'm referring to that will be earth covered, so it will merge better within its surroundings. And there is also planting proposed along this line, along the boundary with the Viking Way. Now, this is quite a dangerous one. I stopped on the main road on the approach to Whitwell. It's a distance view. I took these pictures on the several breaks in the hedgerow that you find along on the approach to Whitwell on the main road. This is the distance view and approach from A606. Now, the inspector refers to glimpsed views in their report, and I have done the same in my assessment of this application. And this is a glimpse view from passing vehicles. Now, this view is only for a very short period of time. Only a section of the front elevation can be seen. As you can see, the view of the dwelling is contained within the site, does not break the skyline, and there is no footpath in this location. This is the next break in the hedgerow. This is, as you can see there's actually the speed sign as you just enter the village to your right-hand side. This is closer to the village. Again, this is only a glimpse view you can get now. You're passing vehicle quite quickly. Again, the dwelling is even better screened from this location. Again, the dwelling does not break the skyline. There is no footpath in this location. You can see my car parked up on the grass verge in that particular photograph. Moving now closer to the access to the site, this is the residential access view from Exton Road looking east. This is positioned at the residential access adjacent to Barneswell House. The height of the dwelling could be seen in the context of the land to the side and the rear. As you see the hedgerow going above the dwelling. It doesn't break the skyline again, and it's heavily screened by existing planting. This is a view from the rear of the old grain store. This was a picture supplied by a neighbour who lives to the south of the site, giving a view of the property from a window of the property. Now we're onto the main road. This is looking north from the main road. Now, this particular picture gives you an idea of the view of the dwelling in relation to the context of the listed home farm. So this is the only listed building on this side of the main road, and this is the location where you can see the dwelling in the context of that listed building. Again, I will ask members to visualise what that end elevation will look like when it's finished. That is the unfinished southern elevation. So that will be earth covered and seeded and will merge into obviously that hedgerow and will be covered over more than can be seen there. This is looking north past Harwood House, again from the main road. Again, a glimpse of the property that can be seen in between properties. This view of the dwelling will be concealed again when the unfinished elevation becomes earth covered and merged with the existing grass mound. I will ask members to consider the palette of materials that can be seen in this photograph. It is a heavy stone facade of dwelling and a stone walling in this picture matches with the stone facade of the proposed of the property. Again, the stone will weather on the proposed property. This is a view of the dwelling from the main road through the curtilage of the old grain store. Only a small part of the front elevation can be seen. This will be further again concealed when the end elevation is earth covered and completed. The stone facade again sits comfortably against the existing stone and will weather. And again, another building that has a stone facade, garage and walling that features stone. Now I'm across the road of the main road, walking up Church Lane towards the church, but again I took members up here and I asked them to turn around at this location. This is a view of the dwelling within the context of the listed Chantry House, which is the thatched cottage to your left. The roof height again does not break the skyline and is contained within the site. You can see the hedgerow above the roof of the dwelling. Again, you can see the stonework of the house can be viewed in the context of the existing stone in this locality. Here is Church Lane. Now this is the view of the property that you can see in the context when we're assessing setting of listed buildings. This is where the dwelling can be seen from the public vantage points on the road outside the front of the church. This again, note the stone frontage of the dwelling. That will weather and sit comfortably within the setting of the church and the historic walling. And again, I walked to the rear of the churchyard to take this picture. As you can see from the plan, that the church only has a pathway up to the church. There's no actual pathway around the church, so this view will be only seen by users or people tending the graves. But again, it's contained within the site. You can see the hedgerow above the site. Again, you can see just to the left of that photograph, stone dwelling. Again, the stone facade can be seen in the context of the stone properties within the vicinity. So in terms of the landscape and visual impact conclusion, we consider the proposal has minimal visual impact to the location, and there are only glimpse views of the dwelling from adjacent public roads and footpaths. The dwelling would sit comfortably with the main elements of stone and glazing, which are not materials alien to this locality. It is therefore considered that although larger than the previous allowed scheme, the building does not have any significantly greater impact on the visual amenity or the landscape character of the area. Now, in terms of heritage impact, which I've touched on within those range of photographs, taking into account the distance from local heritage assets and the use of appropriate materials, there will be no adverse impacts on the setting of listed buildings or the character of the Whitwell Conservation Area to a degree which weighs against the proposal when compared to the originally approved scheme. Now, in terms of impact on neighbouring amenity, the original application wasn't refused by the local authority on impact on neighbouring amenity, and the inspector didn't believe so either. As you can see, I have got my back now to the front facade of the property, to the furthest dwelling window to the south. Now this gives you an aspect of what can be seen from this window. It'd be an oblique view from inside the dwelling, but this gives members an idea of the distance of separation from the habitable room windows to the closest neighbouring property to the south, the window to window distances, and I'm just panning around a little bit and it gets even greater as you pan round from the main view that can be taken from the house. As you can see, the properties get further away and the properties are even greater screened. So in terms of impact on neighbouring private amenity, we consider the reduction of glazing to the frontage will reduce the views that can be gained from the property. Direct lighting from this revised frontage will be reduced and will not be facing directly to the rear of neighbouring properties. And due to the distance of separation, there will be no loss of privacy or over-dominant or oppressive environment created by the proposal over neighbouring properties or their private gardens. Now, one of the key considerations by the inspector in terms of approving the appeal was the sustainability credentials. What formed part of that was the standard assessment procedure, so the SAP rating of the dwelling, and the methodology currently used by government to estimate the energy performance of homes. The applicant has submitted an updated reports information in relation to the property as built. Now, the local authority has had that information independently reviewed by quality professionals, and the SAP calculating was calculated as 188. Now, to give members an idea, a modern day property is a score of 80 to 100 is considered a good to high rating of a modern day property. This is 188, so it's a very high rating. Now, this is higher than the rating that was approved under the previous application, and I say considerably higher than the majority of domestic dwellings. As I've alluded to, the southwest orientation solar array is proposed, and there is a condition, condition number 13, which will secure that. The revised scheme incorporates a ground source heat pump, and we believe the inclusion of the supplementary wood burning stove does not considerably impact on the sustainability credentials of the property. Now, one of the main objections that arose is in relation to flood risk. Now flood risk in this particular area is a three-pronged attack, as it were. There's three particular areas of concern. One is the land on Exton Road and the surface water that flows down Exton Road, which accumulates and runs across this site, and then from this site it goes out across the southern boundary under those properties and comes out onto Exton Road. Now, the applicant only has a duty to control waters that crosses her land. We have had a meeting on site with the applicant in relation to water flow across her land. The Lee Flood Authority are dealing separately with issues regarding surface water runoff from land outside this site off Exton Road, and dealing with issues of water flow onto the main road. But in terms of the water flow across the applicant's site, we met the applicant on site with the Lee Flood Authority, and the applicant did have a previous land drainage consent for works to be carried out. Those works weren't implemented. So the applicant has submitted this land drainage works plan again as part of this planning application, which has been assessed by the Lee Flood Authority. And we believe that if this plan is implemented, of which there is a condition, that the applicant will then suitably deal with the water flow across her land. So in conclusion, the dwelling is larger than previously allowed, but it remains autonomous, sustainable, earth-sheltered dwelling built with a high design stat rating. It raises the design standards in the area, minimal visual impact with only glimpse views from nearby public roads and footpaths. The development preserves the character and appearance of the Whitwell Conservation Area and its designated heritage assets. Due to the maintained separation distances, there will be no loss of privacy or oppressive environment for neighbouring properties. The development will not lead to increased flood risk in the area, and as such, our recommendation is to approve, subject to the conditions outlined in the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Paul. Can I ask Tony Godwin, member of the public opposing the application, to come forward? Mr. Godwin, you have 3 minutes from when you start speaking.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair, for giving me this opportunity to speak against the application. I'm a church warden in Whitwell, and this statement is supported by 23 Whitwell villagers. The proposal in this application is very different to the one that the inspector approved in May 2022. And as the building is almost completed in contravention of the approval granted, its impact can be seen. In 2020, the council refused the first application, finding the impact unacceptable. Yet the planning officer now reports that the larger building will not be visibly intrusive or impact adversely to an extent which weighs against development when compared to the originally approved dwelling. This is not correct. This larger building will have a greater impact. It's 64% greater in internal area, longer with the gabions, taller by 40%, and crucially, has less landscaping to conceal it. And size matters in the setting of a small restraint village as Whitwell. Stonework now forms the majority of the southwest elevation in contrast to the original solid strip of glazing. This changes its appearance from a light and translucent building to solid. This and the yellow stone makes the building far more visible than the dark glazing, which set back into the darker shades of the landscape. That stone is a commonly used material in the village does not mitigate this impact. The southwest elevation is now pedestrian, even commercial, and recently degraded by a stove flue. This is far from the striking contemporary appearance the appeal inspector reported. And it does not support Rutland's policy commitments to good design. The bunds extending round and in front of the building are no longer included, and their screening effect is not fully replaced by the heap of soil and a single line of acres. Loss of amenity for the 5 village houses directly overlooking the site is significant. They must have the benefit of screening. So the building will impact adversely, and the application must be refused. Alternatively, Chairman, as this will undoubtedly prolong a process which began over 5 years ago, the applicant could be required to submit a new scheme for landscape screening. This should be equivalent to the approved plans and scaled up for the enlarged building with increased planting to maintain privacy. The plan could be developed in consultation with the village. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Godwin. Members, questions, please. Councillor Andrew Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Goodwin, you said I think you said it's 64% larger in internal area. Is that right? Is that what you said? How have you come to that? I mean, that's 1.5 times bigger, or half as big again. I mean, sorry.
Yes. It started out as 100 and something square meters, 200.
Mr. Godwin, could you just turn your microphone on just for those watching online? Thank you.
Yes, sorry. I think it started out as 100 and something, and it's now 200 and something.
So, can we have some clarification on that?
It's on the screen.
There is a slide.
Oh, is it on there?
Okay, there it is.
Yep.
So I think, yes, it was 126 square meters approved, proposed 206. Unless
Thank you. They will trust your mathematics. Thank you. Councillor Corby.
Yeah, Mr. Goodwin, just took that last point you said, that wonderful word consultation. With respect to what has been proposed now, it's not for us to be involved in one way or the other, but has there been consultation of a positive nature between the parish and the applicant in trying to form a solution that's happy for everybody, that's good for everybody?
As far as I know, not. There hasn't been.
Thank you. Councillor Tim Smith.
Thank you. Do you now consider the proposed building to be not innovative or outstanding in its design or sustainability, which is one of the NPPF's criteria?
I don't consider it to be innovative. I'm old enough to remember that in 1974, I attended a lecture by Arthur Quarmby, who started the concept of the earth-sheltered building when I was at university as an architecture student. So it's not innovative in that way. I don't believe it to be cutting edge in terms of the dwelling itself and the energy performance of the dwelling. Thermal mass is known about, and it's a device that was developed again in the 70s and 80s, but it's rather been superseded by concepts such as passive house, where you're building to a performance criteria, and the building just has to be insulated. Thermal mass doesn't, really enter into the equation. It's known about, but basically a passive house will perform and it'll remain at 21 degrees the whole time with very little heating. Very little heating. It's just relying on your ovens, your human beings inside. No.
Thank you. Full answer.
Thank you. Other members? Councillor McRobb.
I accept, of course, your arithmetic, and we do have the figure in front of us in that table that the internal floor space was 126 metres squared and is now 206 metres squared. I'm just looking at the elevations, the front elevations of the two versions of this building, if you like. And it seems to me that the area of the appearance, that facade that presents itself to the neighbours, to a passing viewer, that doesn't seem to me to have significantly increased. And the extent of floor space that's increased internally seems to consist of the frontage pushing a little further forwards at the corners and a little further back at the corners, and the addition of 2 rooms that would in any case have been buried under earth and grass. Would you agree with me that the size of the frontage has not changed significantly?
I think the main point about the frontage, and in fact it's what we as villagers noticed first, is that the elevation is actually taller by 1.2 metres. Again, if you refer to Paul's schedule there, and I think, reading his report, what has happened is that the construction, the applicant has lowered the whole building by 1.2 metres, but actually the extent of the elevation is 1.2 metres higher, taller. But I'm not allowed to ask a question of Paul, I suppose.
You can't, Paul, you can clarify that position if you like.
Yes, it's the applicant has used the levels agreed within the discharge condition application in terms of, because the construction has changed, the front level of stonage above the windows is higher, but it's still within the height constraints that was agreed in the discharge condition application. So the top of the roof isn't higher than was approved.
Just to clarify, it's cut down slightly, but the overall height is at the same height of the original. So the top of the dwelling is at the same point as the original approved scheme, but basically the ground's cut slightly lower in order to accommodate that. So in terms
must be 1.2 metres lower.
I think Paul set it out at point D there. You've got the height of the proposed and the height of the approved there.
Very
yeah. It's about a metre difference.
Yeah,
I
so
think,
it's the
on
D
that.
column, approved 3 metres, verified 4.2.
Yeah. So it's about a metre.
That's what I mean.
1.2
that
metre
elevation itself is taller.
But in terms of
Mr. Chair, if I may make sure that I understand
No,
this.
please.
Then if what I might call the altitude of the roof of the building has not changed.
Correct.
And so in terms of the visual intrusion against the landscape, that also has not changed.
That's a much larger question, and I wouldn't agree with you on that. I'm talking about the elevation being taller. You look at more stone and glass now. You know, it's actually taller. And as what I pointed out later on in my presentation, is that the bund walls, which if we could turn back, there isn't a picture in this, I believe, Paul, you haven't got it of the first application. You had these sweeping sort of crescent bund, you know, earth, lumps of earth, which swung out almost in front of the building. And significantly, they went over this end and covered up more of the stone there. And then you can see it's a section through there. Came round, more on this side. That one has significant screening for the houses, which are directly adjoining.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions, members? No further questions, then, oh no, Councillor West.
Thank you. Last minute question, Chair. If that earth bund was brought round to screen the neighbouring properties, as it has you've said per the original application. Do you think that would make it overall a little bit more acceptable to yourself and perhaps the other 23 villagers?
Definitely, I think so. I mean, that has been the basis of my presentation. You know, the appeal inspector came in and he thought it was okay. So that is the, you know, that's the line in the sand, I think. But if there was more screening, I think it would, you know, it would mitigate the fact that the building is it's become longer because of the gabions. And actually, I don't understand why the earth doesn't come down here and fold over this gabion. Now, you could have angles of repose of earth, which is sort of about 40 degrees. I mean, you can go steeper if you put some structure in it, but, you know, 40 degrees, but, you know, that could start to fold over and you can have less stone wall.
Thank you. Members, any final questions? In that case, thank you very much, Mr. Godwin.
Thank you.
Can I ask our Councillor Cloran Heckles, ward member? Cloran, you have 5 minutes, as you are aware, starting when you start speaking.
Evening. This retrospective application to vary the original approved plans for Field House was submitted over a year ago and in effect put on hold any enforcement action that Rutland County Council may have considered taking. According to Rutland County Council Planning Policy Enforcement Policy version 2.0, breach of planning control is defined as the carrying out of development without required planning permission or failing to comply with any condition or limitation subject to which planning permission is taken as being granted. The policy indicates 3 months for an investigation decision. On 17th of March, Mr. Milne requested all answers to the issues raised no later than 21st of March and stated failure to submit all the information to the required detail and standard within this timeframe will result in the local authority commencing enforcement action. On 27th of March, Mr. Milne stated, "We are still not in receipt of accurate plans." Indeed, even now the final version of 7 submitted sets of plans appears not to include the flue for the wood burner, and some of the glazing details are different and do not comply to the specified anthracite colour. Also included are gabions, which mean it may not be entirely earth sheltered after all. The plans before you repeatedly refer to agreed at discharge. However, this isn't planning consent. Discharge is meant to be extra detail fulfilling conditions and not a new building design. Under the conditions imposed by the Inspectorate, no development above ground level shall commence until details of the drainage at site access into Exton Lane has been submitted. Yet the drainage seems to be one of today's considerations. In January 2024, Whitwell flooded and one property had some manure in it. The original planning permission was granted on appeal as the innovative dwelling would be built into the ground in a manner that respects the site's natural topography. The principal rear southwest which faces the village would be largely glazed. Vehicle parking would be provided in a hollow which similarly to the dwelling would be built from local limestone and steep slope bunding soil with a ha-ha at its top edge to safeguard the house from livestock. Under Section 73A, planning changes can be made to a previously approved development that not significantly alter its scope or impact. Amendments are limited to non-material changes and do not significantly alter the development's approved characteristics, so they typically do not have significant impacts on neighbouring properties. Planning permission was granted by the Inspectorate under NPPF paragraph 84 due to its innovative design. The original design was described by the Planning Inspectorate as state-of-the-art dwelling. The inspector stated conditions covering facing materials, landscaping, levels, lighting, the extent of the residential curtilage and removal of certain permitted rights are necessary to ensure the development does not harm the character and appearance of the area. Yet this application seeks to retrospectively change most of these. Critically, Crucially, it is visually more obtrusive for the neighbours due to the material used in height from the original plans and large expanse of stonework rather than the dark glass that would not have been seen. I hope you actually all took up the invitation to view the property from the neighbour's house, as with a change in perspective, so the perception of the building changes. It is estimated to be 64% larger than the original design, with extra rooms, and indeed the plans changed what has become a study back to being a bedroom in order to fulfil the Section 73A requirement that the building conforms to the original description. The inspector said in his approval, given that the dwelling would be built in the hillside with no part of its structure protruding above the natural occurring topography, it follows largely as a matter of logic that it would have little impact on the surrounding landscape even before one considers further mitigations in the form of landscaping scheme. Those parts of the dwelling that would be visible outside the site will be limited to the southwestern elevation. This would have a striking contemporary appearance that would add a new and architecturally distinct element to the local landscape that is likely to generate considerable local interest. In short, it would possess the wow factor. Whitwell is an Article 4 conservation village, yet I cannot see any comments from a conservation officer about the revised building within the consultation. Instead, just a comment from the officer saying the design of the revised development does not impact adversely on heritage assets and maintains the character and appearance of the Whitwell Conservation Village. The property is clearly visible as you enter the village, whilst the sustainability credentials seem not to have been affected by the property no longer having special thermal glass. The exceptional innovative design of the property is clearly contentious, and for me certainly lacks the wow factor that the inspector was expecting.
Can I ask you to wrap up, please, now?
Okay. In conclusion, I'm incredibly concerned about the recommendation to approve the application in Whitwell and the future implications for our county. I haven't seen comments that convince me that approving it is justifiable. In summary, I urge the Planning Committee to do the right thing by Rutland and indeed nationally and reject the application. The difference in the two schemes is material and should not be ignored. It is sufficient to focus on sustainability above design and the lacking wow factor. Many new builds would have equally efficient profiles.
So I can ask you to wrap up now, please.
Okay, sorry, I've got 2 more sentences. Is that all right?
Very quickly.
As the MPPF stated, effective enforcement is important as a means of maintaining public confidence in the planning system. I cannot stress the importance of maintaining public trust in the planning process. If you get planning permission to build a building, you should build that building and not a different one. I urge you, therefore, to turn down the application. Thank you very much.
Members, questions? Councillor Clifton.
I think we all heard Mr. Godwin's comments. I just wondered, as the ward member, what's your view on the issue of landscape screening, and secondly, the suggestion that, if I can call it, turfing or grassing around the edges to sort of effectively hide what is a very distinctive modernist building. How do you feel about that?
Thank you for your question. It's quite difficult for me. I'm not a structural engineer to answer that. My concern being that because the building is 1.2 metres higher than it should have been in the first place, if you put, you can see the start of what could be bunding there, but if you put that all the way around, in order to actually produce effective screening, you're going to have a much bigger slope, and I think you would need to speak to the flood officers about whether that might impact further flooding. That would be one of my concerns. Does that answer?
Members, any further questions?
Yeah, a couple of things. Killoran, you began your presentation by talking about how this retrospective planning application had blocked any enforcement action by the council.
Yep.
Are you suggesting that this was a motive for the planning application?
I'm not sure at all. Basically, the first step was that I understand the residents contacted enforcement because the building didn't look at all like the plans that had been approved.
Okay.
So it went via enforcement, and the enforcement officer actually confirmed to me that the Section 73 had been applied for, therefore it halted any enforcement.
Justin, do you want to interject?
Sorry, Chairman, just to clarify, in terms of the enforcement policy, taking enforcement action is always a last resort, and that's in line with government guidance. What we say in our enforcement policy is that if there's potential for the breach to be resolved through a planning application, then we will seek to do so and get an application. So that's what enforcement officers did. They saw that there was a breach, they discussed it with officers. We felt that there might be potential for it to be resolved through an application. It never offers any guarantees because it comes to, they come to committee, you may take a different view on it. But in line with our policy, it's always, if we think that there's a chance that it can be resolved through an application, then we'll seek that. Clearly, if that's not forthcoming, then we would take enforcement action. And clearly, if members take a view tonight that's different to officers and refuse the application, then we would still then move to enforcement action.
Thanks, Justin. And my second question for Killorn. You said it's clearly visible as you enter the village. And I wondered, from where exactly?
I drove down the A606 just as you come into the village. There's a 40-mile-an-hour limit. You can see it clearly on the horizon.
Would you agree with what Mr. Milne suggested earlier, that this is a brief glimpse? As your car is probably, as you enter the 40 limit, travelling at possibly above 40 miles an hour as you go past the gap in the hedge.
I'm very careful. I definitely stick to the 40. It wasn't for me a glimpse.
Okay.
Perhaps other people drive faster than I do.
Thank you. Members, any further questions? If not, thank you, Claude. Can I ask John Dickey, the agent, please, to come and speak? John, you have 3 minutes again from when you start speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to make a presentation to the Planning Committee this evening in support of my client's development at Fieldhouse in Whitwell. In situations when we're at committee with an officer's clear recommendation for approval, I wouldn't normally address members, but given the degree of attention that this retrospective application has brought about, I thought it sensible for me to make myself available to the Planning Committee tonight to respond personally to any questions that councillors may have. The genesis of this project has been well documented in the officer's very detailed report to committee, and I don't think it either necessary or helpful for me to expand on that report, as my clients and I concur with its conclusions and recommendations. I would also make the point that we are agreeable to the planning conditions as proposed in the report. All I would add to the officer's verbiage is to reiterate the point that the proposal before you preserves the defining characteristics of the original scheme, approved on appeal in 2022. It follows that, in my opinion, and that of officers, therefore, the changes in design are capable of being dealt with under the Section 73A legislation. The main issues being the impact on the landscape and heritage assets, and the sustainability credentials. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. If councillors have any questions regarding my client's development, then I'll be more than happy to assist.
Thank you, Mr. Dickey. Members, Councillor Andrew Rann.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Dickey, the obvious question I'm going to ask you first is, given the previous level of controversy on this application, why did you go ahead and build without permission?
When I wasn't involved with the original planning application or appeal, that was Jerry Harrell. It's often the case when you're looking at developing working drawings, which is where I came in, that changes come to light, and that the scheme needs to be amended in a number of ways. It was through practical considerations that we decided to change some elements of the scheme and we evolved, and the design evolved to the scheme that you see before you now. The compound curve nature of the existing prevailing site made it difficult to predict exactly how the earth sheltering was going to take place, exactly what its form would take when finished. We had always intended to have as-built topographic surveys carried out and deal with the changes by way of a Section 73 application at some point. We've pulled forward that. We had to pull forward that as-built to date topographic survey in order to deal with the Section 73 application, and all of the drawings and details that you see before you now are based on that as-built topographic data.
So you were always going to go for a Section 73A application?
It looked like we would we would have to do that, yes, because there would be some changes that would necessitate a 73A.
Okay, well, my further question then is, if the committee is minded to refuse this application, what will be the effect? I mean, will it be able to be finished, or what will happen?
In the event that that the committee decides to go against officer's recommendation and refuse, then we would almost, I'd take instructions from my client, but we would almost certainly have to take that to appeal again.
Thank you. Members? Councillor Tim Smith. Microphone, please, Tim.
Apologies. My first question, mainly to the second one. Were you responsible for the landscaping of the site?
Yes, in the sense that the scheme that we inherited from the original appealed application didn't show all of the contours and the reforming of the land. So we, as part and parcel of the condition discharge application that Mr. Milne referred to earlier, we developed a fully detailed landscaping scheme. So yeah, that was one of my designs.
I mean, I probably haven't seen it in the papers that were supplied to us, but has it changed substantially? Because according to what people have said, it seems to be less than what it was previously.
Well, I wouldn't say that the landscaping is less than it was previously. We're certainly proposing to carry out the same level of soft landscaping planting as approved on the condition discharge application, and the way in which the land has been reshaped and remodelled concurs with that application too.
Thank you.
Councillor Corby.
Mr. Dickey, obviously looking at the two initial plan with all the glazing and the difference now, and it states there that you have removed the glazing due to structural and overheating reasons. Can you give us some more indication about the structural reasons there? Because obviously that is the stark difference between the application that the inspector approved to what we're looking here. So can we understand a bit more about the structural reasons as to why that glazing has been removed?
Sure. If you look at Dr. Harrell's original scheme, when I inherit someone else's planning application drawings, I would like to have a level of detail that I can simply take on board and develop for building regs for working drawing purposes. That was a challenge because Jerry, bless him, had shown glazing above the level of the transoms, the heads to the fenestration, which made it extremely difficult to work out how you're going to retain the soil behind it. So it seemed to me that from a structural point of view, from a practical construction point of view, we needed to form a parapet retaining wall behind which we could contain the earth sheltering and below which we create the fenestration.
So are you saying it's more for practical reasons than or structural reasons?
It's both. It's structurally it's better. It's easier. It's more sound. It's difficult to create what we call a curtain walling design solution, as Jerry had shown, if you're going to retain a degree of earth sheltering at a higher level. Also, there are significant, as Mr. Milne alluded to earlier, there are some significant overheating problems that created a challenge to adopt the fully glazed west-facing elevation, and so we introduced more conventional but still significant glazing on that elevation.
Yet we've got an awful lot of glazing still reduced, yet we have a log burner with a flue for extra heating. So could you explain the situation with regard to the heating scenario?
The log burner stove that would be used for occasional spatial heating, you could even boil a kettle on it. It's there for supplementary reasons. It doesn't impact on the sustainability credentials of the building, either in its fabric first approach or in terms of the technology that we're putting into that dwelling. It's just an ancillary device that my clients would like to use for supplementary heating.
Yeah, I only asked the question because, again, this was originally approved basis of it was very special under, what was it, 87, I think it's 139 these days in terms of the design. It would just seem to me that whatever the change in 76 and 73 you're trying to achieve here, you're still looking to achieve that excellent design mode or reasons that was put forward by the inspector at the time, and I just feel that the flue with the wood burner is not part of what could be considered in that respect.
I think it's well, it's a choice thing really. This is the third earth-sheltered property I've been involved with, and the other two are built and occupied. They're in Castle Bytham, and all my clients want wood burners. They just like them. I guess, you know, I do. They're just something that you like to have, but it doesn't impact on the very high sustainability credentials of this building.
Councillor Wise.
I'd like to come back to the comment that Councillor Brown made about applying to alter the original plans. You said you always expected to have to come back for some alterations. You weren't absolutely sure about some details. It seems to me what's fundamental to a lot of the objections is what we have before us aren't minor changes. The difference in look between those two is quite large. The original plans didn't have the little rooms on either side. These aren't minor changes. I'm painting the windows a different colour. These are quite major. I would have expected these to have come back to planning, even if you had to come back later because the earth didn't quite fall into the right place. These are quite major changes to have not come back, because if we now refuse these and you don't get the appeal, you've got an almost finished building that you've then got to do something with.
Well, whether the changes are considered to be minor or considered to be major, they do fall under the remit of processing of an application under Section 73A. They just do. You know, they are the sort of changes that can be dealt with under that planning process. The two rooms that have been added on either end, as I think somebody mentioned earlier, they're contained within what would be an earth-sheltered end of the property anyway. It just seemed like sensible use of space that was going to be completely hidden from view.
Councillor Rob.
Yeah, following up on that theme of hidden from view, we've heard that the original proposal, which we don't have before us tonight, had bunding that curved round the ends of where the gabions are and masked off more of the frontage of the building from view down slope. What was the reasoning behind not putting those in? Why are they not present in the current design?
In order to contain the earth sheltering at both ends, it was necessary to form some kind of structure. Once you really looked at the sort of detail of it, and we had a measured survey to go by, creating those curves and that shape with gabions was a more practical solution, and it still gave you the same effect, albeit with a stone face. The potential doesn't really exist there to put a sloping section of earth sheltering down. It will start to obscure the light and view from the windows facing west.
I'm not sure I follow you on that. Could
Well,
you maybe illustrate on the elevation? Because one of the people who made a presentation earlier suggested that it would not be difficult to bring the slope of the soil over to mask off the gabions and thus hide at least some of the frontage from view. I don't understand why that isn't possible.
If you look at the actual layout and where the levels sit and where we've shown that gabion wrapping round, it follows a similar shape to where the earth sheltering was shown in Jerry Howell's original scheme. So it does curve round and it does create that obscuration when the southern end is filled with soil and it's got grass growing on it. So it's a similar shape, but it's got a gabion face. Now those gabions are going to be organic eventually. The stuff will grow. They will rewild themselves, not just on the top, but on the faces too. So then it's not going to look as, if you think it looks stark now, it won't. In time, it will assimilate into the landscape. So we considered that gabion-based retaining wall approach would be acceptable in visual terms when submitting the Section 73 application.
Thank you. Members, any further questions? In that case, thank you, Mr. Godwin. Miss Dickey, sorry. Long night. Before this was started, one member did request for potentially a recess at 8 o'clock just for a comfort break. Is everybody happy to carry on? At the end of this application. Okay, thank you. Members, we now have the recommendation from the officers. Questions, please. Councillor West.
First of all, Chairman, I just really want to congratulate Paul Milne on probably the best and most comprehensive presentation that I've seen at Planning Committee in 6 and a bit years, or 7, however many years I've been sitting here. That was an extremely comprehensive way of hopefully putting to bed what's been a very protracted set of applications for the same proposal, which is I've been dealing with since I've been sitting on this committee. So just thank you, Paul, and bloody well done on that so far.
Thank you, Councillor West. Councillor Wilby.
I was hoping to get in first, but I would like to underscore that, Paul. It was brilliant, and it was in the form that used to happen some 10 years ago here on these planning committees. I thought that was a really good, and more importantly, you walked us round the building. We did the on-site review, and we could see for ourselves exactly what the perspectives were. We walked to the church to look to see what was there and what was not. I'm an ex-RAF reconnaissance crew, and I have to say, if Councillor Killoran managed to see much in her passage at 40 miles an hour, I really take my hat off to her, because I have been going backwards and forwards because I live in Ryle. I come on there, and all the time I'm looking to see that building, and it never seems to have been possible for me to get a good look at it.
Thank you, Councillor Wilby. Especially your Spitfire is slightly quicker. Members, any questions? Councillor West.
Thanks, Chair. I'll come in with something a bit more meaningful this time. I think we've heard from the applicant about the realities of building that house, insofar as the original proposal was glass and a few slim steel, presumably steel struts holding up what was going to be quite a considerable weight of earth above it, and that's clearly, with hindsight, not going to work, is it? So there is always going to have to be significant change to how that load bearing is going to happen. Glass and a bit of slim steel isn't going to do that. So I think that is the reality of what we've got in front of us. I think it'll still be bloody hot inside it, even with the reduced amount of glass that they've got there. I've taken on board the agent's comments about the fact that the stone gabions, as you'll see in those pictures there to a degree, will grow organically and will sprout weeds and all sorts of things over the years. And as far as I'm concerned, the flue is not a big deal for me. It's not a deal breaker. It's not unreasonable to expect that on a, 3-week foggy stretch, you might want a wood burner to sit by when there's no natural warmth coming from the sunlight through those flues. So I can't see any reasonable grounds on which we could turn that down. The officer has said that that is acceptable within the scheme as originally approved at appeal. The only thing for me is whether we can try to condition in or encourage, it depends what other members think, some other form of supplementary screening around side there to sort of reduce the stark impact on the other dwellings just across that shallow valley that's in there. So that's, I don't know what I feel about that, to be honest, and so I'll see what other members think.
Thank you. Councillor Corby.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Council at West. I mean, I have to say that the initial design looked very attractive and looked very good, but I can understand the practicalities of where we are here. Taking away all the issues that have been gone through, my gut feeling is here that there is no real planning reason for us to refuse this. It's not my cup of tea, I have to say, all round, but that is subjective. So yeah, my general view is that I struggle to see any reason why we should turn this down.
Thank you. Councillor Wise, then Councillor Ellison.
I was just going to say much the same as Councillor Corby. I think my feeling that we're being almost blackmailed into accepting this is not a planning concern. If this is accept what we've built or we'll take you to appeal. For me, if this was a good build, we should have had planning permission earlier. At an earlier stage, I really have this gut feeling that I'm being put in an impossible position, but that isn't a planning concern.
Justin, did you want to follow up on that?
I was just going to reiterate the point of the slide earlier on. Members just need to consider this application as if it had come in as a normal one, and if this had come in originally, if you consider that you would have accepted it, then you should. If you think that you would have refused it, if it had come in as a normal planning application, then you would vote to refuse it.
Thank you. Councillor Ellison.
Thank you. Having gone round it, I found it quite, I think with time it'll settle in a lot better. It is quite obtrusive at the moment in certain places, but I think it fits in well and it doesn't seem that much larger than anything I've seen, so I'd be liable to support.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Would there be a reason to restrict permitted development rights on this, so a big conservatory or something like that would...
There is a condition that
removes
permitted development, condition
right.
7.
Yeah, I thought I read it somewhere, yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Clifton.
Thank you very much. I was just going to say I thought that Councillor West's further suggestion of landscape screening is very good and I would support it.
I would also support that proposal, and if it is not practicable at this stage to apply that through a condition or in some way through the planning process, then I would encourage officers to be negotiating with the applicant and their agent to achieve the best outcome that can be achieved in that regard.
Justin, can you comment on that?
Yeah,
It seems to
Chairman.
be quite...
Clearly, we've got a landscaping bund that goes along that boundary. If members consider that additional landscaping or increasing that bund and additional planting, then we could certainly add an additional condition to require those details to be submitted. And agreed. Yeah, I think condition 3 could be amended to incorporate, to require additional details of increasing the length of the bund and some additional planting in that area, which could then potentially be agreed with possibly yourself, Chairman, through discharge.
Thank you, Justin.
I would support that, Chairman. I'd also like to say that we're being asked to refuse the application on a number of grounds, one of which is that the appearance...
You're not being asked to refuse anything.
Let me rephrase
You're being asked to consider the application.
Let me rephrase that. We are being urged by some of the people who have spoken this evening to refuse the application. Is that an acceptable form of words?
That is more realistic, yes.
Okay, thank you. One of those matters is the visual appearance of the frontage. And this takes, I think it breaks down into two separate aspects. One is the increased height, which is a concept I'm still struggling with, because the extra height, to my mind, consists of extra depth, not extra elevation, because it doesn't break the skyline any further than it did, as far as I can tell. The appearance of the stone, well, one of my touchstones for this kind of material is the mansion on Hambleton Peninsula, which when it was first built was glaringly bright, but it's now weathered to look like an acceptable part of the landscape. And even though I was very hostile to it at first, I've come to accept it over time. The other point, the flue, I can't see how we could possibly take that as a reason to reject this application. This is a field with livestock in it, and if the owner were to leave a large tub of feed in the middle of the field, it would probably be no more obtrusive than that flue, but there would be absolutely nothing that we as a planning authority could do about that. I'm very much minded to approve.
Thank you. Any more questions from members, particularly around the proposed condition? We've heard from 3 or 4 members. Are other members minded to the same? Councillor Smith.
Yes, I'd just like to comment on condition. The reason I asked about landscaping is because Mr. Goodwin mentioned that was would make it more acceptable to residents of Whitwell. So therefore, I would support better landscaping, or what's perceived to be better landscaping, as a condition.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Do we have any more questions from members before we go to the vote? Councillor West.
Thank you. Justin, how would we word that condition?
We amend condition 3. Just bear with me. Just get the exact wording up.
We give a time frame.
Yeah. So I think we can amend condition 3, which relates to landscaping and boundary treatments, that details of the landscaping to be submitted to and agreed in writing with officers, and that includes extending the bund along the along the southern aspect, with some additional planting along that as well. And then, like I say, the final details can be discussed with the chairman as well. And I suggest that we give a time frame for submission of that application so that we receive it. I think
Within 3 months post-decision?
yeah, I think a lot of the other ones we've said within 3 months post the decision, so that would be seem to be a reasonable time frame.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Justin.
Well, if that's acceptable to everyone else, I'll propose approval subject to Justin's condition.
Please have a seconder. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
No, it's not.
No, sorry? Abstaining. So that's 10 against, 1 abstention.
Thank you. We'll need to take a 5-minute comfort break, and then we'll return to the agenda.
You are. I never heard the end of it.
Right.
I know. I know. I'm going to tell Councillor West that as well. That I'll never
Thanks for
heard it.
burying me. Thank you.
Well, I hope, hopefully.
Yes.
No, that's
Councillors, can we please return to the forum? Councillor Paul Brown, you're causing trouble. Please give my committee back. Thank you. Trouble causing Liberal Democrats. Influence from the benches. Are we all back? Okay, back to the agenda, onto agenda item 5C 2024-0700, Empingham Medical Centre, Empingham Medical Centre, 39 Main Street, Empingham. Retention of a single-storey prefabricated modular building to provide consulting rooms for a further temporary period of 3 years. The recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions. Justin to present.
Thank you, Chairman. As you've already said, this is an application that some members may recall that came to committee, I think it was in June 2021. This was for the medical practice, and it was to provide additional consulting rooms in a temporary modular building. So you can see on the slide there, the existing building is highlighted. This is the location of the temporary building, and it was located on the car park of the medical practice. This is an aerial photograph, so you've got Willoughby Drive here, Main Street, the medical practice, and these spaces here are where the building is located. This just shows the view of the existing building on site. It was painted that colour at the request of the Conservation Officer back in 2021 to help it assimilate with the stone in the area. This just shows the rear elevation, and this just shows a view looking back across the car park, and in the background you can see the closest listed building, which is number 2 Crockett Lane, which is the property over here. Again, this just shows a picture looking back across the access to the site and the car park. Again, you can see here that this is from out the site on Willoughby Drive. You can just see the edge of the building there, fairly well screened, and it just shows the issue around parking that is around the area. Again, going up Willoughby Drive towards the junction of Main Street. This is looking south, and again taking on Willoughby Drive, just looking north again. This is from Main Street looking down Willoughby Drive, and this is looking east along Main Street, and you can see there are a number of parked cars in different locations. Members may recall originally this was one that officers had concerns about and had recommended for refusal because of the highway safety and parking issues. At the time the original application was considered, members felt that the benefits of providing the much needed additional consulting rooms and surgery outweighed that harm, and approved the application. The relevant planning policies have not changed, and they are all set out in the planning report before you, just listed on the screen now. I won't go through those in detail. Just in terms of plans and details, just outlines the red line site, which is the surgery and the car park area. Again, you can just see, as shown on site, this is a prefabricated building, parking spaces, and the existing medical centre and roads around, and 2 Crockett Close, which is the Grade 2 listed building. These are just the elevations of the building, but you've seen photographs of what it looks like. And the floor plan just showing again the internal arrangements and the consulting rooms. There's 3 within the building. This is a plan as set out in the report. Highways colleagues have been consulted, and they have raised no objections to the proposal, subject to some double yellow lining along Main Street and Willoughby Drive in order to help visibility displays at the entrance to the site down here, and then on visibility space along Main Street, Willoughby Drive. These will be secured through or paid for through planning obligation contributions that have been collected already in order to ensure that that double yellow lining takes place. So, as I've said, Highways have confirmed that they've withdrawn their original objection. And I've also said the impact of the design of the building, it's not something that would be appropriate to keep on a permanent basis on the site, as it doesn't preserve or enhance Empingham Conservation Area, however, or the listed building, sorry. However, the harm is outweighed by the overriding public benefit of preserving the facility for welfare for patients, and therefore considered acceptable for a further temporary period. And again, the location of the building would not have impact on the residential amenity of neighbouring properties. Before I go on to the conclusion, it's just to say that the surgery have been, I think, actively looking at alternative sites, and there is a site, I think it's on Whitwell Road in Empingham, which is one that's currently being pursued as part of the new local plan that we're working on. So there is potential site coming forward there. So this 3-year addition would enable the local plan to go through, and hopefully the surgery to potentially relocate there at some point in the future. So it's considered that the proposed development would not have any significant adverse impact on highway safety or on the Empingham Conservation Area or neighbouring listed buildings or neighbouring residential properties, and that a further temporary period subject to conditions is appropriate. Just to draw members' attention to, there was an addendum item, there was a typo in condition number 2, and that's being corrected in the addendum paper. And then some further comments from Empingham Parish Council. But other than that, the application is recommended for approval for a further temporary 3 years.
Thank you, Justin. Could I ask Stephen Turnbull from Empingham Parish Council to come and speak? You have 3 minutes, Stephen, from when you start speaking.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Stephen Turnbull. I'm a member of Empingham Parish Council, and they've asked me to come along and just say, I'm going to be very brief. But I want to make 4 points. Firstly, as mentioned in the addendum report, the applicant has entered a dialogue with the Parish Council. They've engaged with us, and we are very supportive of this proposal, and also more broadly of the objective to relocate within the Empingham Parish. Secondly, we agree with the planning assessment that the less than substantial harm is outweighed by the community benefits. Thirdly, we are very pleased as a parish council that the county council has agreed to fund the 4 bits of yellow lines that were shown on the presentation earlier. And fourthly, and finally, the parish council hope that by the end of this 3-year duration of this permission, that the surgery will have been able to relocate by that stage. So that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Members, questions? If there are no questions, as ward member, Councillor Smith, would you like to speak first, if you want to say anything at all?
The only thing I'd like to say, I'm very pleased to hear that a different site is being proposed or being considered, because that's what the surgery needs in the end. There's no room to expand any further on the site they are in. It needs a new build somewhere else to accommodate all the patients that they have, which has increased quite markedly over the last few years. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions? Councillor Corby.
Thanks, Chair. Julie. I know we talked outside there, the double yellow lines. I was my doctor's surgery. I was there this morning collecting my tablets that keep me alive. And one of the things I noted often there, we know there's the traffic issue there, and I note the double yellow lines. But what I noted this morning was that people with disabilities, there's one parking space within the surgery itself. And I did wonder whether, because literally so somebody had to stop on the road adjacent to a parked car, holding everything up, while a disabled person gained access to the surgery. And I wonder whether, along with the double yellow lines, it might be prudent to think about a disabled parking area outside of the surgery if you're thinking of those lines in terms of, you know what I'm talking about.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. If Councillor Corby is uses the surgery, has he got an interest?
I will pass it over to Charlotte, but that would preclude a lot of people.
That's a good point. I think it caught me off guard now. As a user of the facility, you're probably better abstain from voting. It may be safer.
More than one,
Thank you.
I'm happy to abstain.
Is there anybody else who needs to abstain?
I was, Mr. Chair, going to, before I said anything else, I was going to declare that I'm also a patient at the surgery. I've been in that consulting room and received treatment, but I also believe that I have an open mind about this application.
Is that okay, Charlotte?
It's a little bit of a tricky one. I don't think you've got a pecuniary interest, but obviously in using the facility, it may imply that you could be biased towards supporting the scheme. And probably as a result of that, it's probably safer to abstain from voting to ensure the decision is sound.
Thank you. So those who... Councillor Payne, is this to say...
Just to throw another curveball at legal, in 2 weeks' time I'll be going to that surgery, having never been there before. Where does that put me?
I think if you've not used it previously, then you're okay.
Thank you. Does anybody... Councillor Smith, do you use that just as you're an Empingham board member?
No, I don't use that practice.
Okay, thank you.
I have a completely...
Thank you. So members with no association with Empingham medical practice, do we have any further questions? Councillor West.
Is 3 years the maximum temporary planning duration we can? It is.
Councillor Wise.
I had 2 or 3 points. One was I see no problem with the 3 years, but there could be pretty speedy builders to get a surgery up in 3 years to take over. So I am a little concerned, but that's not my concern today. I do think the community good outweighs the fact that it's potentially not the prettiest building in a village. I think, Councillor Corby, I remember reading something about they've currently got 2 disabled spaces, but we're extending to 4 in Berkshire.
Yeah, Julie, please. Yeah, sure.
Through you, Chair. So at the moment, they've got 6 standard parking spaces, and the gap between the parking spaces and that ramp is considerably less than what it needs to be. And those 6 spaces should have changed to 4 disabled as part of the original approval for the temporary cabin, but it wasn't ever done. So as part of this application, I've reiterated to planning that I would like that done, and there's a condition requiring those spaces to be changed to disabled. So whilst the gap in front of them is shorter than it ideally should be, with having the widened spaces, it will make it a lot easier to use that part of the car park for disabled users. 2 of the site visits, I asked people specifically why they weren't using the car park, and they said because they don't feel that they can get. There were people using it, but not many. But some were struggling to get in and out of there. So rather than having a disabled parking space on the street, once they've done this, I think it will make it a lot better for disabled users. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. So just one point before maybe Councillor Brown picks up on it. Is this part of your portfolio, Councillor Ellison? I think possibly that you need to also abstain. Councillor Rob, who is
Mr. Chair, although I will abstain, can I speak?
Probably not. No.
Okay.
Councillor Raypayne.
Right. It sounds a flippant question, but it's actually meant quite seriously. This is going to be another 3-year temporary planning permission. So my question is, how many temporary planning permissions equal permanent?
In reality, the guidance is that you should grant a temporary permission, and then once it's been after that temporary period, you shouldn't really be then constantly renewing it. I think the issue is in terms of this particular one, and there are instances where we have done it elsewhere, but you have to look at the individual specific circumstances. And I think this one, it is fair to say that there are issues for the surgery. We have explained that this is not going to be a permanent solution, and there will be a limit to how long this can go on for. I think that the fact is that since the last one, there have been discussions about looking for a new site, but that again, that has been tied up with the local plan, it's linked with a housing allocation as well. So on Whitwell Road, the south side of Whitwell Road, there is a put forward in the emerging local plan is a site for residential with space for a medical practice at the side of it. Now, clearly, that's got to go through the public examination and see whether that site then whether the local plan is then adopted. If it is with that site in, then hopefully the 3 years would not be there. If it's adopted and we're still tight on time, then there might be a further one, but I would envisage that once we know that there's a suitable site for a medical practice, then we wouldn't be continuing to renew this.
Because as we're all aware, this site really is no longer fit for purpose. We've only looked at the problems with the parking, you've got the problem with disabled access. It's out, a great success. It's very popular. I've driven many people there as a voluntary driver, but we can't go on. I dislike the idea of running on temporary plannings. I've seen it happen before. I don't want to see it happen here.
No, like I say, to be fair, as officers, when this originally came through in 2021, we recommended refusal on highway safety grounds. Members felt that at that time that it was a significant public benefit that was required, and that's why it's been approved. The only reason we are recommending approval now is because the double yellow lining will help to mitigate some of it, and the fact that we think that there is light at the end of the tunnel for a relocation.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Smith.
Just a comment. I noted in the papers it was mentioned that the practice website does not mention parking. It doesn't have any maps or whatever. It would make sense, I think, for the practice to show on the website or talk about the parking issues. The yellow line is going to be introduced, etc. I don't know if it can be made a condition or.
I think we could possibly include an informative just to say that do you want them to suggest that there is, I don't know what you want to say specifically, that there's limited parking on site?
And please be courteous about parking.
Yeah.
I mean, it's under the travel plan 12 there, just make some sensible suggestions.
Can I
as
suggest
to-
that you put an informative in that they discuss with the ward member?
Yes.
What they would
yeah.
like.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Members, any further questions? Before we go to the vote, can I just ask Charlotte for next time just to confirm what the actual process is about people with medical practices and being members, just for future meetings, because if something like Tesco's come up, well, I go to Tesco's. So, but no, I'm not being flippant, but it's a very similar, very similar process. So maybe we could just get clarity.
I don't think Tesco's would be an issue, obviously, because it's a much larger. I think obviously this is a smaller practice, which is much more personal to the locality and that people live locally. So under the council's protocol, I think there's a chart that advises you onto the options as to whether or not you may be conflicted, and potentially because it's in the locality and your local users of it, then there could be an implication of bias because of you know, you're using that facility, so therefore you're more likely to potentially support it, and I think that's the potential issue here. So just as a safety measure, it's probably recommended that you abstain from voting on the current application. But should something like Tesco's come up, that obviously wouldn't be the
That's
case.
maybe a flippant comment, but you know what I mean. There's lots of places that I use, so like parking spaces at the cricket in your barn, Andrew. Therefore, if there's no further questions from members, can I have a proposer? Wow. Ward member, Councillor Smith, the seconder, Councillor Karen Payne, all those in favour? And abstentions?
So 8 for 4 abstentions, that's carried. Chair.
Thank you. If you could kindly expedite your exit so we can go home, Councillor Brown. I can start the preamble. Mr. and Mrs. Andrew Brown, Fairchild Lodge, Liddington Road, Caldicott, formation of new entrance driveway to existing dwellings is brought to us as obviously Councillor Brown is a member. Recommendation is for approval. Justin is going to briefly go through the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is fairly straightforward. As you can see, outlined on the site there is Fairchild Lodge, which is the application site, and to the north of that is an agricultural holding. The site shares an access, and you can just see there's sort of a hedge line, tree line going down here, and this is where the shared access is currently. So this shows the agricultural buildings and the access into the site. This is then the view taken along the driveway towards Fairchild's Lodge, and this is the road that's currently used. The road is effectively the other side of that hedge, and this is the location where the new vehicular access would be located. Again, so the new vehicular access located roughly just where we're stood, and the you can see the existing one just in the distance. Again, this is just looking southwest along Liddington Road towards Caldicott. The relevant policies are obviously set out in the planning report again. In terms of plans, this application just shows the site outlined in red. All of the land surrounding is in the applicant's control and is in land blue. This shows the existing situation, and you can see the driveway, the shared driveway there, and the existing access. And this just shows what's going to be happening. So effectively, this will be there'll be planting along here to close it off, and the new access will be put in and a gap in the hedgerow. And that is the only change in there. And the existing ditch will be culverted. So main issues, the proposed new vehicle access would not result in any change to the existing off-site parking arrangements, and the proposal would not have an unacceptable impact on highway safety. There'd be no adverse impact upon the character and appearance of the surrounding area. And on that basis, Chairman, it's recommended for approval, subject to the conditions outlined in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, members? There are no questions. Councillor McGrubb.
Very short. I couldn't get a sense of what the problem with the culvert is.
And it's up, they're just going out, they're just building over it, so they will have to put one in.
Thank you. In that case, can I have a proposer? Councillor Wilby, seconder. You've got to put your hands on back up again. Thank you, Councillor Payne. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Justin, if you want to quickly just skip through the appeals report.
Yep, sure. So there's one new appeal come in, page 131. This was at Fairfield Close, Langham, which was retrospective removal of a 3-metre high dead hedge to the front of the property and replacement with a 1.5-metre high fence. That application was refused, and we're obviously going through the appeal process on that. In terms of decisions, page 132, section 3, 3.1, Hillview 1A Main Street, Whitwell. This was application to partially demolish a boundary wall and gate. The application was dismissed. The inspector felt that the proposal wouldn't preserve the or enhance the conservation area because it would effectively break the sense of enclosure that the wall created. So it was a fairly minor application, but nonetheless would have had an adverse impact on the conservation area. So a good win on that one. The next one, 3.2, was a Section 73 application to amend the design of a dwelling at Water Lane, Ashwell. This was allowed. The appeal inspector felt that the amended plans wouldn't have an adverse impact on the conservation area. We felt that it was increasing the size of the dwelling and losing some would have a greater impact than the scheme that we had originally approved. The inspector took a different view. That happens. We'll bear it in mind, but not a lot more to say on that one. And finally, 3.3, this was flat 357A High Street East, Uppingham. This was a retrospective application where they'd re-roofed part of a flat roof to the front and rear above a double garage and replaced Collie Western slate with a black slate roof. The appeal inspector agreed with us and dismissed the appeal and considered that the black slate roof wasn't appropriate in terms of the impact that it had on the host dwelling and the wider conservation area. So again, a positive outcome on that one as well. And that concludes the appeals. Yes, it's not on this list, so it'll come through next time, that one. Yeah, I can't remember all the details offhand, but it will be reported at I think it's May's meeting.
I've not been made aware of any urgent additional business, and therefore I close the meeting at 9:05 p.m. Thank you everybody for tonight, and thank you officers and David and Charlotte.